Welcome to Tavern Stories. I'm Kitty the Wolf, your hostess in the show, where we roll some dice and talk about the stories we enjoy, the stories we're a part of, and the stories that are a part of us. If you'd like to join us in the tavern during a live recording, you can grab a table in our Discord room. The front door to the tavern is through my Patreon to connect your membership to our Discord server. 2 levels of membership, patron for $4 and Patron Plus for $8. The difference between the two is for the cost of a drink. You can be seen on the screen behind us during the show. And for the cost of a 2-person round, you can see the bonus material in the loft level of the tavern, as well as participate in the Q&As. Tavern Stories is sponsored by Volante Design, which makes streetwear for nerds who game, watch, and read stories. What I'm wearing is the Helsing from Volante's, I believe it's the Noir. I remember what this is. It's basically like their Victorian steampunk
I love it.
Kind of line. This one is in Gravestone, which is brown and gray, and has a detachable hood. If you're looking for clothing that's tavern ready, look no further than Volante Design. Their high quality handmade jackets bring main character energy into your everyday life. With official licenses from series like Mass Effect, Lord of the Rings, and Star Trek, as well as plenty of their original collections like Star Warriors, Victorian Gothic, and Cyberpunk lines, Volante has a jacket for whatever your lifestyle needs. Ethically sourced and manufactured in the U.S., Volante jackets are quality made and will last you for years to come. Just go to volantedesign.us and use code TAVERN for 10% off your entire order. That's TAVERN, all caps, for 10% off. Volante Design, stay badass. And that's enough from me. So, first, all gals episode. I've been gunning for this for a while. And some powerhouse minds at the table. So let's go around and get to know each other. Well, we're posting it now, so we'll get to know each other through stories that we know or stories that we're consuming at the moment. So, Molly.
Sure. I am Molly, and I enjoy stories that are typically nonfiction stories. So science, history, back to science and science again. But I do also enjoy some sci-fi, some fantasy. I mean, I have a Lord of the Rings tattoo on my back, so I mean, I can't hide that too much. But currently fantasy right now. I'm in a little bit of a fantasy kick. But
okay, cool.
Always a little bit of neuroscience mixed in too.
Yeah.
Or combined.
I love it.
All right, on to you.
I'm Erika, and I love fantasy stories. I think those have always been the stories I've been attracted to. And it kind of ranges. I love romance. I'm a really big sucker for vampire romance, to be honest.
Yeah.
Which now is turned into the fairy romance kind of genre. And anything in that kind of realm. Dragons, magic. Yeah. I love anything like that. I love stories that have magic and like the real world kind of side by side. I.e. like kind of some of the Jim Butcher books with the Harry Dresden kind of things like that. I'm a big sucker for. And I also love anime. Anything that can kind of be a little bit silly, but also have like something that really captivates you, kind of a lesson. So that's really nice.
You also do a little gaming. If I recall correctly. So is it virtual or is it tabletop? Is it video?
A little bit of all of the above. I like video games. I've been replaying Hades again. I'm a little bit obsessed. But I love open world RPG games. And I have been, we do board games, card games. I grew up playing cards. I actually always carry a pack of cards on me. That's my like fun fact, I guess. And then I do play tabletop. It's been a long time since I played in person. I play with some people through Discord. Some friends that we know, and we all play different ones. Right now we're playing Legend of the Five Rings.
Oh, nice.
I think that's the Japanese one, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Nice. That's what I'm playing. So it's very interesting. A lot of Japanese etiquette. It's like, I don't know how you would describe it, but it's like kind of instead of D&D where it's European medieval based, it's Japanese kind of based, but imagine that Japan is the size of China.
Huge.
It's huge, and like it is the world, and so there's like it's the only, I think, tabletop or game that I've ever seen where you actually can use ikebana, like the flower arrangement, as an actual skill that you want to put stuff in. Like, I have, like, a character that has 3 points of ikebana, because, like, you wind up needing this. Like, how random is that? But it totally somehow works.
I can see how this is up your alley.
Yeah, it works very good. And I would say that I play with a lot of really experienced players that are, like, have you ever been in a room with people that you're just like, wow, you're just so smart? Like, how I don't even know why I'm here
right now.
Whoa, thanks. But they're just like, whoa, and so being with them, like, they know all these intricacies about Japanese etiquette, and I'm like, I'm gonna play a swordsman that just is really quick. I'm like that swordsman that duels, that just like whips out the sword, and then and then everything looks right when they put it in, and then the person like gets cut in half and crazy, but like they're just like a quiet, I have a quiet swordsman because I don't know what's going on half the time, but I'm really good at what I do.
It's a super quiet badass.
Yeah, that's who I play. Where everybody else is like doing their thing. Yeah. And I let the other person play the courtier who has to know all the actual rules and come up with the ideas. But it's very, very fun. But we've played other tabletop games as well. But that's the one we're currently doing.
I'm excited that you were here. Thank you.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
We got you at the tabletop.
You also got us on topics. So as I recall, you've got like just a few.
Oh, I have.
Yeah. Sure.
I have too many. I like to talk. I have too many topics that I love talking about. So I'm happy to.
Love it.
Well, let's give it to Shayna for an intro.
Yeah. So my name is Shayna Marlowe. For me, I think might be a little bit different. I do like based on like true story. I think struggled to get information truthfully. I think growing up a lot. So I think spending a lot of time in confusion, you just really seek out all the truths of every little thing you can think of. It just helps you build up your idea of the world. So I think like really, so romance, other than that, I am very heavily a lover, huge lover of all things romance, empathy. I feel everything. So like I'm very much an emotional driven person. So like leading with vulnerability, leading with anything that really talks about like interpersonal well-being, interpersonal growth, interpersonal relationships, how people connect and like to be connected to one another. So family-based things, value-based things, humor too, though I really love to laugh. But like outside of being super into romance, funny is like my other aspect, because it's like you deal with so much trauma work, so much heavy information all of the time, which I also love to just assess kind of how people's experiences impact their life, how they think, how they interact with other people, helps me build a better understanding of the world in a realistic way. And so I think that's really where I get a lot of my like interest in trying to drives my motivation for a lot of the things that I like to do personally, but also like with work, but also for fun too. So maybe a little bit different in that realm, but yeah, a lot of the interconnected interpersonal things is like really where I dive deep into, my interest for sure.
Yeah.
One of the things that I super enjoyed about getting to meet and hang out with you was how much of a people reader you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Observing everything and just to understand it. That's what it is. Seeking to understand. I think if there's anything I can say that's a core of my personality, it's like, if I don't know something about anything, like I want to know like who you are and what makes you you, and not have that like internal judgment of what someone should be or would be. It's just, like it's blank, honestly, on my end. And it's like whatever you're giving, like I'm observing honestly all the things that a person is and how that pertains to like who they are and why. So yeah, I love it.
Well, I know you're a people watcher. I know you're a people watcher. You have to be, because you were also a rock climbing instructor. Right. You were my rock climbing instructor for a while. And watching whether someone is comfortable with doing what they're doing, or watching how they may be able to do it better if you could construct a way to say how. That's definitely one of your strengths.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's fun, actually. You say that. I say it to people all the time because they're climbing, and I'm like the last to come down, and I will often say no, and I will often, I'm not no, but I'll be like, no, you could do this. And other times I'm like, yes, I'm quick to lower. And people are always like, why did you do that? I'm like, they were terrified. They're like, they didn't sound terrified. I'm like, you can see it in their body, like the way they move. So yeah, it's like those little nuances. watching that. It's fun.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, the best way to support the best way to support people, right, is to know, just to pay attention to the little things they might not be paying attention to.
Because it might say one thing, but their body is telling you a totally different thing.
Right. And it's okay to feel those things, right? I think that's the hard part where it's like, no, I don't want you to think I need the help or I'm trying, but it's like, that's okay, right? Like, we don't want you to have anything that's going to be negative for you. So
this is where you are. That's okay.
Right,
you can be somewhere different, like in another minute, but this is where you are.
Yeah.
So, for the people that are tuning in or who haven't done this before, in terms of like being with us in the show, so we're going to list out some topics, list out some stories that we are also ready to gush about, and assign those topics to one die, assign the stories to another die. We'll roll the two, and we'll see which story and which topic come up. Whoever assigned the topic that came up gets a couple of minutes to unpack what made them choose that topic. And then collaboratively, we all work on a conversation that eventually leads to dropping a line or a quote or a reference to the story that came up on the other die. And we'll close that topic that way and then move on to the next roll. So I've got also hourglasses to make sure that even if we, hit the 15-minute mark, then we're kind of on track. And if we don't, then it's a way to keep track of visually of where we are. Don't be afraid of the hourglass. Just, have an eye on it, because I've got my eye on a couple of different things as well. So let's go around and take down what topics we've brought to the table. I'll take down Molly's first.
All right. So my first one is how our subconscious mind, you could just write subconscious mind as like a little note there, but how our subconscious mind plays a critical role in shaping the way our conscious mind experiences and responds to the world.
Okay.
And my next one is very general. It's neuroplasticity as hope. Let's go with this. Hope for change, obviously. We can expand on that.
Okay. What's a little bit about that one? The preview.
I guess it's the idea that, they used to think that, as an adult, you couldn't change. It was like your brain was fixed and it is what it is. And that's just not the case. I think it's interesting going into the science of like how you can change your brain as an adult and what it takes to do that. But just like having that power, like you think, I'm a morning person, or, I'm an angry person, or, I'm not active. And it's like, actually, you have the power to change a lot of things about yourself. And I think that's pretty empowering. And if you like kind of learn how to do it, I think that's a cool tool. It helps with learning too.
Very cool. All right. Erika, what you got?
I think that I would love to talk about women in media.
Nice.
I mean, we got all the ladies here.
Yeah.
And I think that would be a really interesting topic. I also think that I would love to talk about the Adventure Zone. Has anyone listened to that podcast?
I have not. What?
Oh,
yeah. So regale.
I'm excited to spread the word of the Adventure Zone. It is a D&D play podcast based. They have expanded to other stuff, but essentially it is three brothers and their dad, and they are playing a game together. The first little bit they're playing, I would highly recommend starting from like the beginning, like their first ever episode, not just like their recent ones. I think that first one is like the solid foundation, but they kind of slowly get their footing in that one, and they kind of start with a base D&D game, and then they expand. And so one of the brothers, Griffin, is the DM for that first part, and he really like creates this whole story that they tell over like years, and then it's a really, really amazing podcast, and family and funny and just a lot of joy. It's kind of got that part of one of the stories I love to talk about, which is things that can be silly and funny, but also have like parts that make you go, whoa, that's like really impactful.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely one of those. And they have lots of different arcs, but that first one, their balance one, is their most famous one. But you gotta watch it at some point. Yeah.
Nice. For topics, let's see. Let's go over to Shayna.
Yeah. So for the first one, I'm gonna focus on the power of kind of releasing anger. I think that's something that's come up a lot in some of the work that I do, but also things I'm seeing a lot in depicting of like movies and shows too, and kind of how people navigate emotions and kind of how they transform those emotions once they kind of learn more about their past, or kind of do some more of that self-reflection, and also just some different approaches to kind of think through how to do that for different people. And for the second, I'm gonna do maybe some like the misunderstood dynamics of domestic violence. And I'll have to hone that in. So when I get to that point, I will try to be more concise with that. But because I can go probably on and on for that for a while. But it's also hard too, because you don't know which. The misunderstood could be on so many different levels, or people do have a great understanding or they don't. But I think what I'm seeing and hearing a lot more in the community in this work, I think I always assumed that a lot of people had maybe a different understanding of what domestic violence is and the whole aspect of that. So I think, and I just really love that work. And so I really want to kind of highlight that a little bit here.
Absolutely.
So. Okay. Love it. I don't think I really delved into it as much when you had said women in media. Erika.
Oh, sure.
But a preview on women in media, if you don't mind.
I think that it would be really interesting to kind of like look at the way that women are portrayed in media versus like our own personal experiences of women, and how kind of different those often are, and what, portrayals of women do you feel most represent like reality to you, or things that you would like, or how would you like to see it changed? Kind of a broad topic, but just like, I think that there are a lot of, women in media that, like Indiana Jones. I forgot which one it is, but the Temple of Doom, I think, where she's just screaming all the time. And you're like, I've never seen a woman do something like that in a situation like that, And so, but then I feel like there's also been a resurgence of women really trying to take back, like the Barbie movie recently. Really trying to take back the narrative, really trying to portray themselves as well in the media. And I think there are good representations and mediocre representations and ones that aren't so good, finding, what do you like, what do you not like? And
awesome. And then I didn't get to delve into it, but Molly could give us a preview of Subconscious Mind.
So these aren't exact numbers, I'm not positive, but our sensory system takes in like 11 million bits per second, and then we can only perceive like 16 to 50 of those things. But it's in you, like your brain somewhere knows this stuff, and our reactions to things are in large part due to all this stuff that we don't even necessarily, we're not even aware of. And kind of the idea of how that plays a role in our life and everything in our life.
Solid. I have a couple as well. The first one, I know you said you were a romance fan.
Yes, I love romance.
This is a riff on My Chemical Romance. I'm changing it to My Chemical Biography.
Ooh, okay.
My Chemical Biography is about how the body writes stories. The way the body writes stories. So we have memories of how things play out.
Yeah.
There are chemical releases during that, and we basically remember the sensations during those flashes. So our body has not a pen to paper way of writing the stories and retelling it, but it has its chemical way of doing it. And there are also interesting ways to, as you said, like rewrite or overwrite those experiences. So, And because we're in the Christmas season, this is the title I decided to go with, Somewhere in My Memory. For anybody that remembers Home Alone, that's the name of one of the theme songs that they play in Home Alone.
I didn't know that.
So what that one is about is a little bit about Home Alone. It's about vicarious trauma.
Oh.
Yay.
And how pulling heartstrings makes you remember stories, but in pieces.
Yeah, I'm ready for that.
I can talk about it.
Me
I feel like
too.
all of these topics, I feel like I could talk a lot about. I tried to pull in our nerd stuff.
There's a lot of linking, I
Yeah.
think, with a lot of these. Yeah,
but I
it's,
love talking about all of this. So.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm glad you said that. Sometimes I think that the vicarious trauma piece is one thing I didn't remember how much I love talking through or thinking through a lot of that stuff.
It's wild because, like, I think stories kind of offer an opportunity to experience these traumas vicariously,
For
but we're
sure.
also learning about not just what the character is going through, but what we're going through in that moment. So there's a little bit of that.
yeah.
Let's go around on stories. So stories we want to nerd out a little bit. You got about a minute to gush about it. Molly, let's
All
start.
right, I think we've narrowed mine down. I think we're going to go with The Giver, which I imagine a lot of people know that story. It is a children's book-ish, but it is great for adults to read also. And it is a phenomenal book. I remember it, speaking of having feelings in your body without having words.
Yeah.
It just when I was thinking about that book, I was like, I love that book, and I recommended it, to my son. I was like, you got to read this book. He's not loving reading right now. And he's like, what's it about? And I'm like, I don't remember. And so I listened to it again to get a little triggering of my memories. But it's about a society where people live in a very controlled environment. People are not ages, they're numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. After 12, it stops counting numbers. So you're just kind of like an adult. And at each age, there's like a specific milestone or task that you have to go through. And you're in school until you're, or I don't know, 12 to 14. But at the age of 12, you're given an assignment. And it's the elders in the community have been watching you your whole life, and they've decided what you will do well in life. And, they talk about, oh gosh, what would it be like to have to choose your job? It's like, what if I did? And like, I chose the wrong thing. Like, I don't know myself, and it's really interesting. It's like, oh, the other people know me better than I know myself. And it's like, whether they're right or wrong, it's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
And the kid in the book who turns 12 has to take on all the memories of like everybody in society, because these people have no memories of the past and history. And it's a very painful and wonderful thing for them to take on, and it's just kind of the story of that.
Oh wow!
Wow, yeah.
That sounds really
it's a cool story. It's a very good story.
Yeah.
No, you've read it too.
Yeah, I love The Giver.
Yeah.
That's so interesting about like what if you didn't have those memories? Like in my mind, I'm like, all I think about is all the things that lead up to where you are now. So it's like, without that, what could it be blissful too? Like there's a potential blissful aspect of that, but also like
utopia
for sure. Yeah, there's a lot of it that you're like, this is horrible, and you're like, wait, that's cool.
Yeah.
Also, there's no color.
Yeah, no color.
There's everything is gray, black and white and gray.
Yeah.
And so everything is monotonous in a way.
Yeah.
It's like that. It's kind of a utopia in a way, but like the underside of utopia is
but
also
is it monotonous because we have a point of reference, or is it monotonous to like the monochromatic?
Not to the characters. They don't
not to the
think
character.
it's monotonous.
For them, it's normal because they've lived that way for so long.
Yeah.
And so he
But when he gets the memories,
he discovers color. He starts seeing
And
color
love.
for the first time because everybody takes medication that deadens their emotions and they lose their sense of color. And so there's one person in the community that can holds all the memories of the past and can see, and they actually like transfer the memory, so he gets to see them for the first time.
Oh wow!
And you get to see, he starts seeing color, and like the first thing he starts seeing is red. So the red of an apple, the red of this girl's hair, and before that, everybody looked, vaguely the same. And so it's kind of like this talk about difference, and it's very.
Like now, when you said Pleasantville, like that's all that came to my mind. When you said the colors, and two, I'm like, I had to think about how
so much reminds me of Pleasantville.
Yeah, 100%. That I watched that too many times, unfortunately, just because it's so interesting. There's so many things to think about when you look at all the differences when you start to think differently, consider different things differently, and how the world will start to come alive differently. And where color was almost like color came to you whenever you were willing to kind of tap into something outside of yourself or something outside of like that experience that was just that day-to-day kind of structured living. So now I'm really gonna
it's a quick read too.
Cool.
Oh, it's very small. It's a great book.
Okay.
Okay, so sorry, that was more than a minute.
I'm sorry.
My second book is A Court of Thorns and Roses, which we also have both read. It's a fantasy book about fairies and love and magic. And it's, there's like a world that is divided between humans and fairies, and humans live in like one sector of the world and fairies live in another sector of the world, divided by this invisible wall. And in the fairy sector, there's, I think it was 7 realms, seasons and nighttime and daytime. And then in the human world, they don't talk about the human world that much in the book, but it's very similar to our human world. I guess there's poverty and there's wealth, and
it's kind of like the Middle Ages, like medieval Renaissance
hunting with bow and arrows, and
not modern age, but like they're wearing the big poofy dresses. And
it's about like the story of somebody, one of the characters who ends up in the fairyland who is a human, and like their experience in the fairyland, and the author does a phenomenal job of just like the development of like what the character is experiencing in the fairyland. It's just God, it reminds me a lot of my topics, to be honest. It's like the sensory, and I mean, even it reminds me of Giver in a way where color comes to life, and it's just like, it's a really, really good book, and it's a very romantic love story also, which I am also a sucker for.
So I have to ask this more often of people. What connects with you about that story?
Oh man. The love story definitely does. Yeah. I mean, I got my husband and I love him a lot. And it's just like, we're, I like to think, we're soulmates, we're meant to be together. Who knows whether that's true or not, but that's how I feel. And that's how the story was projected. So I was like, I would do that for him too. Yeah. But then like, I really like the magic of it. I really like magic a lot. Okay. And I like relating, I was talking to Chris about this a little earlier, I like relating to like neuroscience to magic, to be like, you know what, your brain is capable of so much. Yeah. It's like, what if you just like eat the little twist right here? Like, would I be able to see all these extra colors? Because like some animals can, so it's just, I like connecting those things and being like, and I love watching like actual magicians too. Like I like watching America's Got Talent for the magicians and the singers. But the magicians are phenomenal. And a lot of times they're like showing you subliminal things. I'm like, what did they just do? Because like they're insane, and that they're just tapping into like the human brain, and like it seems like magic.
That joy that I get from watching magic tricks is just ridiculous.
Me too. Yeah. I'm like, you gotta watch this. That's awesome. So I'd say magic and love.
Okay.
Yeah.
Erika, what stories have you got to gush over?
I can gush over The Fourth Wing.
The Fourth Wing?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about that.
It is a really awesome story about a girl named Violet who it's in a fantasy world, and she has been training to be a scribe in this fantasy world, right? Everybody kind of picks at around 20, everybody has to kind of pick their college. The country's at war, and you go to the scribe quadrant, to the army, basically. You can go like to the medics, or you go to the dragon riders, right?
Oh, nice.
Yes, dragon riders. And so, but the dragon riders are, they're the elite force, but it's very difficult to graduate. When people who go in, like, they only... If you're fragile, the dragons will just incinerate you. Yeah. And also, like, you're only as strong as your weakest link is kind of what everybody's thinking about. And so they will, some of the cadets, like, they're allowed to kill each other with certain rules. And so, like, they're weed out the weak who they think that, like, on their team isn't going to protect them when they're out in war. And so... and then also just like getting through the obstacles of graduation, just the hardships they have to kind of like endure. People die. And so like it is well known. And she's like, I'm a scribe. And she has, like, she also kind of has, like, a frail body. Like, she's kind of small, and she has, like, I think she has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, like, where her joints kind of pop in and out.
Okay.
And so she has, like, medical things that everybody knows about, and her mom's the general, and she is, as the book description says, tough as talons.
Nice.
And she says, no, you're going to be a dragon rider, or you're going to die trying. And so, even though she's been training to be the scribe, she gets pushed into the dragon riders, and she has no other choice. And so it's her, like, adventure through, and there's a lot of, like, intrigue with the world, and just her trying to survive everything. And she is, like, both such a strong character, and even though she is, like, has some physical, like, limitations, she never lets that stop her, and she has to use her intelligence and her wit and her quick thinking to kind of overcome some of the obstacles. So sometimes she doesn't do things the way that other candidates might. She kind of has to find a way around it. And it's kind of like her story. And there's also a romance in there too, which is also really good.
Love it.
Yes.
I'm riveted. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's very good. It's very good.
When you said dragon riders, I was like...
Yeah, dragon riders. And the dragons, you get to see the dragons. They're really cool. Yeah, it's very neat. Very good. A lot of magic, too. When you bond with a dragon, you get magic powers. But the powers depend on the person.
Okay.
And their connection. And so, like, you don't know what your power is going to be until it shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very cool.
It's like,
I love it.
Just thought How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Feeling that vibe. Yeah.
I love it.
The dragon has to pick you.
Yeah.
It's very cool. Kind of similar.
Hit me with another story.
Another story that I really love is Harry Dresden
Okay.
Files, the Dresden Files by Jim Butcher.
Okay.
I've
been told I got to read this one.
Oh, you haven't read this one? You seem like
behind.
The perfect candidate for this story.
I've been told.
I would say that this is probably my favorite series. It is
for the viewers that have
Yes.
not picked it up, and for me who also has not and is looking forward to this recommendation. Give me a preview.
Yeah. So Harry Dresden is a modern day private detective who's also a wizard in modern day Chicago. And he also works, he does side businesses. People come and ask him for help. He doesn't do love potions. It says so in his advert. He also is a contractor with the local police department. So when things happen that are really, really weird, they knock on his door.
Nice.
And they go, can you please help us? And there's like a special unit that does those things, and they have him come along, and he kind of solves crimes for them. And as you know, the story progresses, you get to see him and the magic and the way that he utilizes magic in the world. And there's kind of, you have you have Chicago and the rest of the world, right, that we live in, but there's this underground of fairies and all of these like the supernatural and ghosts and werewolves and like but like some of those are like real people, you know, and like seeing that and both the like supernatural that are kind of close to humans and then the supernatural that is not close to humans
Super
at all.
Anti-human.
Very anti-human, very like alien to human. It's just a very, very good book. And it is hilarious. Like one book opens up with literally like a big gorilla demon just throwing poop at him. And he's running away with a sack of little puppies that he was trying to save for somebody. And he's just like, ah. And he's making jokes. Like the whole time he's like making like little snappy jokes and like and that really like encompasses, like he puts himself in these crazy situations and he just always has like, he uses humor as his like defense mechanism.
Yeah.
And which I don't know. I always find those to be the best people. People who've experienced things and they come out with like this weird dark humor. And he definitely has that. And like you get to see him as he evolves and grows. And it's a pretty long series, but in every book, I feel like for me, they just get better every time I read the next one.
They should.
You know how like books, sometimes like you read a couple and then you're like, oh, it's not the same book I was reading. And it's kind of strange. Every book just gets better. And you're like, whoa, how could it be better than this? And then he does it, and you're like, this, and that's not even his main series. Like, this was his like side one, and he's
side project. And
he really like whenever I see him do interviews, the author is always like, come on, guys, like, I want you to read my main series, and everybody's like, Harry Dresden, which I think is so funny. It's funny when people's like audience is kind of different than the writer in a way.
It just captures a different audience. I mean, like there's an audience for the main, and then there's the audience for the side project.
Yes.
And sometimes they overlap and sometimes they don't. But I mean, if the side project one has a larger audience, what are you going to do?
Yeah. But it's so good, and but I highly recommend anybody to read that as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Shayna, what kind of stories you gonna hit me with?
I know it's wild, right? I have so many stories. I think my mind like glitched, honestly. And so the first one I have, it's actually a movie.
Okay.
It's called Frankie and Alice.
Okay. Haven't heard of it.
So I think it's on Netflix actually too. I actually went back and forth between this and Split. I think Split is probably more common, like a newer maybe version of just depicting like multiple personality disorder or dissociative disorder, right? And so whenever
have you read Sybil?
I haven't read Sybil, but I heard about it throughout, like, weirdly in my life at random times, which actually got me thinking. That's actually what brought me into psychology in the first place, when I started learning about abnormal psychology and personality disorders. And I was like,
me too.
The mind, I'm sure, right? the mind and what the mind can do or capable of, and what provokes the mind to get to certain places, and how trauma truly impacts the brain and everything how we see the world and interact with the world. And so Frankie and Alice is actually focused on Halle Berry. She's the main character, and it's just a really interesting dynamic of dissociative disorder, just because it really goes into like racial trauma, because it focuses on a Black female. I think it's depicted in the early 60s, and one of her alters is like a rich white woman. And so there's like a scene that really like stands out to me, where she's looking in the mirror, and she's looking at herself as this Black woman, but she's in her altar of the rich white, very angry and conservative woman who is, very racist. So she's saying these things in the mirror about Black people, like, and so it's just a very interesting dynamic to watch someone disassociate with like that clear like physical the vision of himself versus like what actually is provoking some of these alters specifically, and what stage in your life these alters were developed in, and kind of what provoked each one and how they interact with each other. So like it's such a very complex aspect of the mind, and for me it's where I truly started to learn like the power of the mind. And I think the aspect of where I wanted to go with Split, just because it kind of takes that a little bit further into how that could potentially change us like physically. Like there's like a scene at the end where it kind of goes into a physical alter of change throughout like the different trauma and how that kind of leads to that. So I think I've always thought about that, like this mutation or an evolution of the human body or mind, like how trauma truly impacts that and kind of like pushes you, or how you survive that, how it pushes you into like the next stage of your life and kind of how you show up. So it's a deep one. It's a deep one. That's the first one. And the second one, I really struggle between, you and I have talked about the show See a lot.
Yeah.
And so I want to go into that one. But I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to do See. Yeah, I'm going to do See. Only because I just haven't seen it in a while. So I was like, oh, there's so many dynamics to this. And there's like 3 seasons. So it's a lot to play off of. But really, the main focus is like imagining like a world where everyone is blind, right? And like how people interact with the world without the ability to see, and everyone in that dynamic never had the ability to see. So it's like a world where everyone never had the ability to see from who's currently alive at that time, and kind of just what that looks like in navigating land, navigating the world, navigating conflict or potential really cool. harm coming to a location, how you raise children, how you giving birth, like all the things of like what you would do without sight, and kind of just the beauty that exists in like connecting with other people, and how connecting to the people and the land and everything really guided them being so successful and almost perfecting their own individual, like personal strength, I guess I'll say, like, right, main character, the fighting, right? Baba Voss's ability to fight is the most beautiful thing.
So beautiful.
To watch. Like, as much as a very anti-violence person, watching him fight is like the joy of my like day, and being able, he's just so skilled. Kind of like you were saying, like, you let your trauma and like what you went through, he was taught to be a fighter and to be like a violent fighter as a child. But he used that, when he got older. Now he is probably the best fighter, I think, probably in the land or in the area that they're in. And it's just the skillfulness on it. And it's very beautiful. So he's very artistic with it, kind of like the sword we were talking about. His sword work is so beautiful, and how you can just see the way he listened, like the sound, like how much sound and vibration impact your ability to like the precision of what's actually going on, who's close to you, where they're at, and like how you can actually do that without having to see them is the most unique thing to Siege for me. So and like how people exist in a world that truly was not created for them. I think it made me think too, like just how much our world today is not catered for those who are different, right? And that's Definitely. In every way. And I think it made me think more about that as a Black woman, right? What the world is like for that, but also in other aspects of ability too. And when you think about navigating the world without certain things that we're so used to, that's really interesting to kind of wrap your mind around, like, what would that look like for you? What would that look like if you truly did not have these things that we don't think about every day? The ability to walk, the ability to see, to hear, and how that would shift everything that we do today. And like, it's such a deep way to think about life, right? And so, very, it's a lot to go in for that. So I'm excited.
I love it. That's one of my favorite shows.
Yeah.
If you haven't delved into it, it's chef's kiss, the way that the storytelling is done, and like the physicality of it too, because they use things like touch to be able to let each other know that they're there. They use sort of echolocation to let each other know that they've walked into a space as the same as another person. There are some interesting things that happen, like there could be somebody who's going through some really strong emotions and they start crying, but you never hear them cry.
Yeah.
They have been so practiced at suppressing the sound of crying because they don't want the other person to know that that's the way that that's affecting them. And that's, I mean, if you ever tried to not loudly ugly cry, there's a lot going on effort wise in order to make that happen. But there's like some scenes where I'm like, how are you not bawling your face off right now,
or screaming or something?
And the way that they keep their voices like totally, even keel and stuff. Like there's the amount of strength to go through some of the things that they go through. And watch out for each other's trust is different, confidence is different.
Trust. I think that's season 2 or something where it's like Baba and his wife. There's a lot of trust with like how they're raising their children and kind of like how that dynamic goes. And that's also another aspect too, which I'll probably get more into when we get there. Because I was like, I forgot the whole other aspect of this that's existing. So I'll save that for that. But it's very, if you haven't seen it, I think it's Apple.
Yeah.
Is it Apple
TV?
Yeah. It's so good. I don't know how to describe it. Like I would always seek out like who's seen it at some point. Like I need to talk about this with someone. So when you said it, that's actually when we met actually.
Oh God, yeah.
That was our first conversation. And I was like, yes, like this is the person that I've been waiting to talk to. Because the way that you saw it too was like, absolutely, right? There's just so many little pieces to focus on here. So it's exciting.
It's rich.
Yeah.
I have a couple. The first one is Gattaca. I don't know who has or hasn't seen it, so I'm going to speak to the general haven't seen it crowd.
Yeah.
Gattaca takes place in the future where we've gone to towards altering DNA of babies before they've been born. Parents can pick the eye color. Parents can pick the they can perfect the child before the child even comes out.
Yeah.
And the kid gets screened for all of the possible maladies or all the possible like down the line in your life kind of biological upsets, like whether it's alcoholism, whether it's addiction or like whatever they screen you for, they can tell you as a parent, your kid's going to have, 0.57 likelihood of a heart defect, or like you as a parent basically know what the survivability of your kid is and all these other things. And you're also able to choose, like, at an embryo state, basically, do you want this kid or do you want that kid?
Oh,
so it's like super controlled, and it's their way of trying to give the parents the best chance of being good parents and give the kid the best chance of living a closer to perfect life. So those are engineered kids. But then there's something called a faith-born. And the faith-born is somebody who has been born to parents that did not want to go through that process. So Gattaca is a story about a guy who's a faith-born, and he hides the fact that he's a faith-born in his adulthood because his brother, I think like his younger brother, is one of the engineered ones. And the engineered one has always been able to run faster, fight harder, be smarter and stuff. And there's just this giant difference where the faith-born son can never catch up to the other son. And so in adulthood, they go their separate ways. And the faith-born basically finds himself what's called a ladder, which is an engineered person who something bad in life has happened to them and they are no longer perfect, but they're willing to do things like give up their blood for the blood test so that, like, if I wanted to pose as a perfect engineered person, but I'm a faith-born, I'll buy blood from one of these engineered people so that I can pass.
I've heard of this. Yeah.
So the long haul idea for this guy is he wants to be one of the space exploration people, but you have to be perfect in order to be a space exploration person. Physically, you have to be perfect. Mentally, you've got to be like a practical savant. And he basically is able to work on the mental part. He's got the mental part in the bag. Yeah. It's the physical part that he has a problem with because he won't be able to pass their piss tests. He won't be able to pass their blood tests. He won't be able to pass their running tests. So he basically hires a ladder. And the ladder is this guy who he was in a car crash I can't remember if it was a car crash or something like that, but he's in a wheelchair. And so because of that, he's considered no longer perfect, but he wants to, go into this and basically see somebody else rise.
Yeah.
And this is such an amazing story.
Yeah. It sounds so good.
Yeah. It's so amazing. And
there's so many aspects there.
Yeah.
He does run into his brother.
Oh.
And his brother can't recognize him. His brother can't catch up to this person because, like, so at the workplace, there's a murder that happens. I'm not giving anything away here. So the murder causes an investigation to happen. Yeah. And basically the faith-born now has to watch his step. He can't get caught because he's now in the selection process for becoming one of the SpaceX people.
Yeah.
And so the investigation basically brings the brother, who's the investigator, closer and closer to finding out who may have killed the person. Wow. So it wasn't the faith-born, but it just happens to be in the same area as the faith-born now.
Whoa.
So I'm a diehard about that movie.
Very
it's
cool.
So fantastic. The other is actually it is a streamed podcast, but also it's a D&D game that performs live at conventions, and it's called Acquisitions Incorporated. And what I love about Acquisitions Incorporated is the storytelling, the character development, the role play. It's basically about it's about a group of professional traveler adventurers. Like you've got it's basically a group that they speak in corporate language as they're playing. So there's a boss. There've got to be, receipts. Everyone's got to keep receipts when they're traveling. They have an accountant that they have to, send everything to. They're basically trying to build a franchise in all the different parts of the universe or multi-universe, or it's basically all the places that D&D can possibly take place in, whether it's hell, whether it's someplace celestial, whether it's someplace underground, it's all these places that they get to go. But they're continually trying to build a franchise. Like, we need the gift shop over here. We're going to, have some affiliate partners over there and stuff. But what's really fun about it is that it's all spontaneous. It's all extemporaneous. It's not scripted whatsoever. So it's just like a conversation that we're having, but they're having it like full on in character. But they also have conversations about their characters outside of their character. And I just went to a convention last weekend, PAX Unplugged, where they did a live performance of their next episode. And it was just an outstanding episode. I didn't expect to get emotional towards the end, but like they've gone from funny and inventive and imaginative in this story to they kind of towards the end of the episode have this thing that happens where they're all kind of confessing their inner traumas to each other. It is, and it was in the most inventive way that the stories get pulled out of them. So each of them has quirks that we've seen throughout their story, throughout the previous episodes.
Yeah.
But now it all clicks into focus why they are the way they are. And, like, there's just some like, moments, and there are some like, moments. So I love when people open up, but I love when people who are pretending to be other people open up. And it's, I don't know, it's a magical thing to watch unfold at the time, because it's one of those, like, I was there when that happened. And stuff. So this, I can't say enough about how awesome that storytelling is.
How cool.
Yeah. All right. So we have 8 stories, 8 topics. If I can ask you, Erika, to grab an 8-sided die, and if I can ask Molly to also grab an 8-sided die.
Which one is it? This one, right? I think. Yes. This is the 10, I think. I think that one's a 10. I think it's this one. Yeah. This one, right?
Good.
Correct.
Yep, it's this one.
I'm like, how many sides? I'm pretty sure it's this one.
Clearly, I don't play.
So, rolling the dice trays, and let's see which 2 come up. We're going to have Erika roll for topics. We're going to have Molly roll for stories.
I got a 3.
I got a 3.
Oh, dang.
Ooh. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
But I love that.
I was like, I'm going with it.
But it was almost like a perfect transition.
Yeah,
We both changed.
And then we both changed.
That was me being like, I don't like hugs.
Yeah.
And she said, I love them. I love them.
It's funny. That's kind of how I met my husband on our first date. He went in for the hug. I went in for the handshake.
Oh, wow.
And then we switched, and we did this like awkward dance.
that.
Yeah.
I love it. So I love that you're a hugger and you went for the handshake. And that's how you knew. Like,
Yeah. We were like,
you felt, yeah.
We've got Women in Media and The Fourth Wing.
oh.
So what we're going to do is we're going to have you open up about women in media for a little bit.
Okay.
And we will all jump in extemporaneously. And then whoever has the fourth wing, which I believe was you.
Yeah, they were both me.
Yeah.
How funny.
In the course of conversation, if you find a way to tie it to fourth wing, have at it.
Okay. I can. Does that end the
Immediately.
topic? Though? I can immediately.
I believe it.
I can immediately, but is that like?
Yeah, I mean,
does that end the topic? Is that what?
Yeah. Well, I mean that ends the topic, but we can talk a little bit more about it. If
You
we
can
want
elaborate
to, or
on
we
the
can,
topic just to be fun.
We got a shit ton of topics and stories. So I mean, like we can either close these quick or draw these.
That's
out.
true.
So either way. Women in media.
Ooh. Okay. Well, now I'm nervous because I get the start us off. Women in media. I'm just really fascinated with how women are portrayed in media, and as whether that's books or in movies. And I think it's really interesting to see culturally kind of how I think about women and girls. And I think with movies in particular, and then I'll transition into books and tie it into Fourth Wing. But with movies, I think for a long time we've had a lot of men writing the books, writing the movies, and we have a culture that's very patriarchal. And anything that is feminine is kind of equated with badness. So you throw like a girl, you run like a girl. And I think that that's just like a small part of it. But I think that that really incorporates into the other elements. And so you have women like in the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, a classic example, you know, where the girl like spends the whole time just like kind of being a pretty side piece, you know, she's just there to kind of like look good and scream and be like a juxtaposition to the really handsome and cool, calm and collected Indiana Jones. And I think that I've been like, it's been very interesting to see how that has started to change. And like, and you still see elements of that, but you know, you have like the Lost Girls and like all these different things that like women trying to tell women's stories. But I think sometimes those just throwing women into a production doesn't always add more to the.
It's like doing it for the sake of doing it.
Yeah, it like sometimes like adding that like can be cool, but it's also doesn't always add like those still aren't like people. Sometimes you still don't feel like they're people, you know, like that you can be a woman, you can be strong, you can have moments where you're weak, you can be not good at sports or not like a tomboy, and you can still be strong and feminine and awesome.
Right.
And I think that there's like, you don't have to put on an air of masculinity to be seen as cool and strong. Yeah. And I really love to see media that really like talks about girls and women in that way, where it's like they're just cool because they're cool, and you don't like they don't have to be compared to men or be involved with men to be cool and interesting. Are
there any characters that you feel like accomplishes that really well?
Cool. I mean,
I can think of a couple, but I kind of want to see if there are any that ping off of anybody's radars at the moment.
I can ping it into something that doesn't have as a cool side character of the Harry Dresden Files is God, it's been so long since I read. Is like there's a police officer. God, and I cannot because I'm doing something I can't think of her name.
Right.
Of course, you know, like I usually know her name. But she is like she's kind of small and she's kind of angry and she has dealt with a lot and she just kind of like comes in and was like, well, I run the show, man. And like you're like, yeah, of course you do. And she just she's such a strong force. And even though she's like a side character and they could be really easily passed off as like she could have very easily been written as a man. She could have also just been like someone else, but like you never lose track that she's a woman. But it's also not like, look, she's a woman. Look, I wrote a woman in here. Right. Like it feels like natural.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. So I think she's a really good character if I could remember her name off the top of my head.
Yeah. Whenever you were talking, I was thinking, so the movie Woman King comes to mind. Just
I love that movie.
I think I thought the movie was great. I try to bring it up to a lot of people that I'm around and a lot of men, which...
Oh, my husband loved it too.
That's wonderful because there's a lot of men that didn't, and I was very surprised that
I don't know how you can't love that movie.
It's such a great depiction of redefining a woman and redefining what a woman's role is and can be, and in a society that can actually look at that as a benefit and a plus, or even just not as different. I'll say in the movie, yes, of course, it's depicted as different, right? Because it's a woman army, right? And that's their goal, and they're solely the army, you know, of a certain area. And it's such a beautiful depiction of trauma leading to independence, leading to internal strength, leading into community building. And, you know, you get a lot of these younger women that are brought into this community because either families don't want them or they're saying that you can't, marry them off. So then it's like, then you have no value, right? So I'm going to bring you to this place where you can't get married anyway, because that's the role of the tribe. You know, you're not married, you're not having children. And so your sole focus is to build up yourself and what it is to be, you know, a warrior, a leader, strength, but doing so with other women who literally just buff you up every day to be the strongest version of yourself. Absolutely. And reminding you of your purpose in this role. And it's just a beautiful thing of sisterhood and of just like people really...
And love.
Yeah, honestly, loving each other and building family. That's like the one main character, the younger girl who's coming in, and she just has nothing, no one, right? Her family was like, you have no value to us. And to see that emptiness disappear through this community and just being taught to feed into who you are, like you have that inner strength, you just have to believe in it and you have to just keep fighting for it. But seeing that connection later on and how that benefited her was beautiful.
Yeah, and having role models too, like role models of strong women that are also like not perfect people,
right?
And I'm terrible with remembering characters' names today.
Yeah,
but there's in the Woman King, the main character is helped along and taught by an older. An older person, and she's the best character.
Yeah.
She reminds me of one of my coworkers that I work with. And it's just like so strong and funny and kind, and she is
humor in it too. Yeah.
She is and there's a scene where that character fights the men's army because there's a big gender dynamic. Like you never forget that this is still a patriarchy, that they're an element. They're a woman, a matriarchy element within a patriarchal system. And so like the men can have families, but they are not allowed to have families. They can't have husbands because if you have a husband, then you're kind of like, it's kind of got that like Madonna and the whore kind of element of like, you're either, celibate and, and above it, or if you're sexualized, then you're either a whore or a mother. And those are really the only things you got. You can be not sexual at all, or you can be a whore or a mother.
Yeah.
But there's nothing in between.
Yeah.
And
totally
so, and so you see them kind of grapple with that and like how they deal with that, but also like they have to kind of stand above, against the men. But like that character also, like when she fights the men, she's obviously stronger. She's also able to withstand more pain.
Yeah.
And like she's just like, and then but she never loses herself. She never loses like her sense of strength and ability within herself. Even if she like loses, she's never lost to herself. She's just very strong internal core, you know what I mean?
I think you hit the nail on the head on like what it's going to take to get that kind of strength. Is the only person you got to race against is yourself.
Yeah.
And anybody else is welcome to join that race, but you're really only going to focus on like whether you're evolving, whether you're the one that, like, if you're afraid of something, it's you who gets to beat it.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get a little help from outside, but it's still you that has to beat it.
Yeah. And they were strong as a force. They were stronger and more creative too in the way they were doing things. Yeah. So it was really nice. I think they had done a prank or something where they had developed some sort of like explosive device or like something. I don't know if it's an explosive device, but and then they were like, we can use this as like a distraction for the team. So it was actually just like seeing how you can be innovative in these groups too. And even if you're at like this lowest level, right, you still have that impact and you're not going to be just discouraged just because of you maybe age or experience in this. It's like we can recognize there's a different level of experience here and how we can utilize that just to better put us in a position to protect ourselves. And it's a beautiful story.
I also, one thing with the Woman King I also really, really love is I think it's also a good portrayal of Black women. Yeah. That is not like slavery.
Yeah.
Or
being enslaved as a
or being enslaved. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like it's not like I'm dealing with slavery or the after effects of slavery. Right. And it's like you get to they're in the West Africa, and so there are like they do talk about it, but that's not the central story.
Yeah.
And I love it's also not in the US. And because I think it's so good to see stories that are outside of that that aren't also like, here's a token character for you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
because they do incorporate like the slave trade it's incorporated
there.
In that.
It's strongly there.
Right.
Yeah.
But just not as a focus at all. And not really on women being the focus of the slave trade either. Yeah, actually just more so depicts just the story of
they're part of the environment.
Yeah, 100%.
Part of the environment, but not like, that's not the story.
Yeah.
It's not like what I would call trauma porn.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And even the trauma aspect,
where it's like,
right? It doesn't focus on that. There's like a clip or two of the main character's like trauma that led her to be the strength that she, because she's like the top warrior of all, I think, warriors.
All the women, yeah.
And it shows like a scene of it slightly, but that's it.
And and they talk about trauma in the way that it like builds, but I like that it's not like the trauma isn't the story. The women and the strength of women are the story, and like how like you can be strong and you can be really like an interesting person and be dynamic, and you can be like have good parts and bad parts, and you know, and that complexity. I think that we get very two-dimensional looks.
So I highly recommend a show called Foundation, based off the Isaac Asimov book series, and it's on Apple. And Apple has done so well at building the kind of female characters we want to see.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw them in the show C, and like just the women in there are absolutely models.
Yeah.
They're strong, but they're also vulnerable parts about them. They need, but they also are looking to be self-reliant. There's like a whole mosh of that. But in Foundation, also very much represented.
I'm about to check that out.
It's wild on the cerebral part, because like there's mathematicians in there who are basically prophets, and they have taken all the data that there is about civilization and managed to take that basically big data and project what is going to happen to civilization. And the women that are in there are either the clerics, or they are the badass Han Solo kind of types, or they are the mothers who didn't know they were mothers because they had given their egg or had their egg compartmentalized, and then they went into cryo sleep, and then their daughter grew up without them, kind of thing. I'm not giving a whole lot of it's such a rich story.
Interesting.
But wildly, there's this in the first season you'll find that the daughter catches up with the mother, and they're the same age because of the mother having gone into cryo sleep. So the daughter has grown up to about the same age as the mother.
Oh wow.
And the mother did not know that she had a daughter, and the daughter had always known that she had wanted to meet her mother, but had this glorified idea of what her mother was going to be like. And there's just this wild dynamic between the two of them.
Interesting. Yeah.
I look forward to.
Yeah.
That sounds really interesting. I'll check that out.
So you only have a few minutes left. You're going to have to wrap it up. I'm going to talk about my recommendation.
No,
not any of that. It's rock climbing, which Chris knows about. I mean, talk about women empowerment. So rock climbing is a really cool sport for people who don't know about it. I mean, that was going to be one of my topics, and we can still nerd out about it.
Absolutely.
We'll just bring it into all the topics.
All the topics. Yeah. So I work with people who have Parkinson's and rock climbing and teaching them, and it's a great therapy for everyone. And they've done studies on like depression, anxiety, and we're doing a study on Parkinson's now. But climbing is a cool sport. But for women, it's also a really cool sport because it's problem solving in a physical way, but there's no correct answer to the problem because everybody's a different height and different flexibility and different strengths and different weaknesses. And so like you can get to the top in any different way. And it's like, I've done a lot of sports growing up. I swam in college. I'm a runner. I play soccer. And it's like, with swimming in practice, you can keep up with the boys because we have this super endurance as women. We can do super endurance sports. So when you're doing a whole practice, you can keep up. When you go to the race, they like crush you. And it's just like, I kept up to do all these practices. It's not fair. But with climbing, it's pretty even. And especially when somebody's new, it's like, people are always like, oh, it's an advantage to be tall. It's an advantage to be this. And it's like, no, none of those are really a factor. It's like a very woman empowering sport. And it's like, you go in with people. It's a great place to take people on first dates.
True. Yes.
I mean, those are great.
It's just one of, if you go in with somebody else who has not climbed before, there's like literally no telling who's going to be better. In fact, typically it is the female.
Yeah. Yeah. Different center
which
of
is
gravity.
interesting. Yeah.
I think also we
Yeah.
have practiced, usually, at least if you're short, trying to climb up the shopping to get the top shelves.
That's right.
Like when you're at the grocery store and you're like, I can't quite get it, and you just
That's
climb
very
up.
true. Even at home, right? It's like,
I have to
if
climb
you
on the
don't have
counter.
Support. Yeah, if you're by yourself, you can make that work.
There's a lot against yourself in climbing too. Like you were just talking about.
Yeah.
It's like you're just trying to improve against yourself, which is also a cool aspect of the sport.
Yeah, it's like
I
a
agree.
problem solving. It seems like you're just constantly. Yeah, right. You're just
Constant. It's like a
reworking.
meditation, problem solving, physical, and
100%,
like
yes.
everything.
Like I almost like it for like people who stay in like a narrow mind. It's almost like, how do you erase that? And like maybe this is a really good way to do that without it being like content focused, right? It's like, expand your mind for any way you could. And I think about like survival, because like real monk, like if you're on, I don't know how people do that, by the way. That's so scary, but also amazing. But also it's like, like if you're gonna survive, like what are the all options that you have to work through this? And that's actually that's really a great way to think about expanding the mind.
And you get like a reward at the end every time, or almost every time. Like even if you don't make it to the top, you know where you are.
And you're like, I made it this far.
They actually, on the study they did on depression, that they think that that's one of the main reasons that it's so beneficial, is because there's just like this instant gratification reward, and like such a concrete like way to tell where you are in the sport. You're developing, and you're like,
and you get
this
better
is where I'm at.
Right,
and it's got quick, increase in abilities, and then it kind of plateaus after a while. You get better at little things after that. Yeah. There's always a challenge to overcome.
I mean, it's got the exercise element that we're looking for mental health treatment, but also like I could see it as a great exercise for mindfulness. Like,
for sure.
To notice, start to notice your body.
Listen to yourself breathe.
Listen to your, focus on one task.
Right.
Yeah.
And block out the rest of the world. Try to, like, because you can't climb and be dealing with and problem solving when you're thinking about the past or thinking about all these other things. And like, it's just you. And then also like you have to start to notice your body. And that's a big part of like trauma healing and recovery and like, and dealing with mental health, like using that noticing part of your brain. And so I could totally see how that works. And I'm going to have to start.
A lot of work.
I'm going to start thinking about I never, like, I see, like, trauma, like, informed yoga, but I never really thought about it with,
we could talk for 4 hours. I get lots of,
I love that.
It's a connector, right? So I'm like, all right, what groups of Mason do we have that need to
also
do some, like, outside of the campus-based recovery? And you could do it for every program, every UL group. So I'm just saying, if there's interest there.
It's like a group therapy too. It's very become social,
I would take my grad students there just to get out of their mind about the work that we do too, and just to focus and connect with each other too, don't think about falling, just think about going up, right? Just think about going up and the next thing and the next thing. That's a beautiful, fun, connecting activity that's also movement without being like in a gym, which I love.
So the falling comes as part of the package, just so you know. But here's the thing, is that you do it often enough that it becomes, if you can regard your falls as your benchmark or your constructive, like it's a resting period to be able to sit down and say, what went wrong? Oh, that's what went wrong.
Sure.
And it's also a resting period to be able to be like, well, it's a totally different wall once you get back on it after you've assessed your situation.
Yeah,
I love that.
And it breaks the fear a little bit each time, I feel like.
Totally does.
Right? It's like, I fell last time, I'll be good. I'm not, it's not
in the beginning,
Yeah, sure, yes, of course. I'm sure it's
but then after that, like, just
it's really fun watching people work through their fears, like extreme fears, and just like,
I'm sure you see a lot. I didn't think about that. But if you're out there observing people and how they're engaging in it, I'm sure you witness a lot of
I worked with one girl who she came to one of my classes, and she was like, I'm not going to go to the top, just so you know. I'm afraid of going to the top. And I'd known her as a member for like 4 years.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, you've come in here from 4 years and you've never climbed to the top of the wall. And she was like, yeah, I'm just afraid, I don't want to. And I was like, and at the end of the class she made it to the top of the wall, and it was like she was like in tears. Like, I mean, it was so cool.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I'm going like,
Love
yeah,
it.
what's preventing you from thinking? You know, in my mind, I'm always
too.
like,
Yeah.
is it that like you're afraid of that achievement, right? And I think I've seen that.
What does the
too much
top
more now.
represent?
Yeah, right. Like, because then it's like, what's next?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the fear, right? Of like,
What
if
do I
do
work
achieve
toward?
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
so many.
Luckily, it was a
Interesting.
3-week class, so I had 3
Oh,
sessions to
okay,
work with her.
wow, Yeah,
Yeah. That's really
awesome.
cool.
That was cool.
Yeah.
I remember you saying that when you wanted to start your degree, that you wanted to do it so you can tell people from a doctoral perspective that rock climbing is medically good for you.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Wow.
I know. This is true. And now I am doing research, and people will think rock climbing is good for people with Parkinson's disease. But, I think that it will expand. But yeah, it's such a cool.
100% good.
That's so.
I mean, we're
Totally
people who have
see that.
autism. I mean, we have a whole
Yeah.
plethora of.
Oh wow, that's a whole
Yeah.
other aspect of it too,
I mean,
right? Whew.
Yeah, and people with physical disabilities too. I mean, it's like overcoming things. We got
It's that mental blockage of what we've been told you
Totally.
cannot do.
exactly.
Which is like, what? Based on what? Right? What was it basing this on?
You just nailed it on the head right
It's-
there.
Yeah.
One of the
that's
Parkinson's
wild.
guys the other day was in tears. I mean, it's just so touching, but it's like, he's like, you don't understand. He's like, I have Parkinson's and I'm just constantly told what I can't do. And he's like, and I just never thought I'd be able to do that. And it's just, yeah.
I love this for you so much. Because my favorite thing in life is like watching people grow. So I'm like, that is that daily. Like you're probably seeing it in so many different ways, interpersonally, but physically in all the ways. Like, and honestly, like that is the PhD for me. Like honestly, you can study things forever, but when you're seeing it 10 times a day, 50 times a day for years, that's a case study, right? Each one of those is that it's raw data too, right? It's not skewed. It's not put in a certain category. It's not triggered, but all the thing, right? That is your expertise. You are a doctor in that because you've seen it. It's not theory. It's not.
Yeah.
It's so practical, and you can identify in different ways. Like I promise, I wish that was more of a accepted reality, but it is so real, and I would trust that over.
It's changing your personal narrative.
Yeah.
It's like being somebody who is double jointed, who is trying to get over different fears and jumping on dragons. That
Yeah, right.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
We're gonna need you for that a lot. Please, please do
very
that.
true.
Yeah.
We're about to go for 2 hours.
Yeah, because it won't be me.
I know. I was like, oh, now I want to talk about. I want to talk about rock climbing and the sea the sea TV show that we were talking about. I was like, oh wow, how cool is that?
Oh yeah, it'll come back.
I know. I'm like, I'm ready.
Let's do it again.
Yay!
Okay. Are we?
Here.
Is it me and her again?
Is it us? Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Oh, hold on.
Did you want
No,
to?
it's okay. No, please.
We got a high five or pound?
Okay.
After.
Or I kind of like the both though, because I feel like it's both of you coming together.
Let's just
We gotta figure it out.
Let's see what happens.
It's got to be spontaneous. Okay.
I can't see.
I got an 8.
Okay, so 8 and 2.
Ooh.
So 8 is somewhere in my memory, and 2 is a court of thorns and roses.
Ooh. Okay. Somewhere in my memory. Where?
All right, that one was me.
Oh, vicarious trauma. Oh.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Somewhere in my memory. Vicarious trauma.
So somewhere in my memory,
Oh,
I'm going to see if I could do this without getting.
yes.
a little
Sorry,
emotional
I gotta
at the beginning.
refresh myself.
Me too.
Yeah.
Reading my notes.
So, if you haven't watched Home Alone because either you're too young to remember when it came out, or if you are somebody who doesn't like Christmas movies, or somebody who has moved on to other Christmas movies and believes that Home Alone is just not one of your top 5. Home Alone for me is a very, there's an emotional place for it because it makes me laugh every year. It makes me enjoy, like, there's a piece in there about like cheese pizza. For some reason, I'm like suddenly needing a cheese pizza when I'm watching Home Alone. It's a Christmas thing. I'm a big goober when it comes to Christmas.
Me too.
Massive goober.
Love it.
But the song, when I hear it, God damn it, John Williams is such a good composer. And John Williams like rules my internal soundtrack like in my childhood. And the song Somewhere in My Memory is it triggers something that is involuntary emotionally. Which is interesting because there are memories that do that, where whether it's sound or smell or touch or taste, and like immediately, like you get just a nip of it, and then there's just this flood of all these things. And I'm kind of like,
I agree.
I'm really excited about the way that memories do that, stories do that, themes do that, like songs will do that. Like I listened to this song and I just tested it like a couple of days ago, and like, you know, about 15 seconds into it, I'm like, and it still works. So, but I keep on wondering whether there's a way to make stories do that, to elicit, trigger like chemical emotions, or something like that, so that it sticks. But I did just find out from the book that you recommended to me, The Body Keeps Score.
Oh yeah, that one's great book.
The way
I've read it like 3 times.
The way that people remember things.
Yeah.
There's your memory goes into one of 2 places. So and please correct me if I say any of this.
Absolutely.
Like
no worries.
A little less than layman terms, because I'm still sort of like wrapping my head around some of the language here.
Yeah.
So regular memories that you remember, like the chronology of, or you have sense made about it, or that you have a rationale that about that memory, contextualized memory.
Right.
That goes into one place in your brain. The memories that have to do with when you needed to act, or when you needed to survive, or when you needed to like it's not a place where you need rationale. It's like where your instinct kicks in and the things happen.
Yeah, your instinct.
That memory goes to the other bank, and what happens with that other bank is there aren't words associated with that. There's feelings associated with that. So when feelings are associated with it, it doesn't follow a timeline. It doesn't follow a time construct the way that the other memory bank does. So that's why, for instance, if there is like a car crash that you go through and someone asks, so what happened? Tell me from, soup to nuts, what happened? You're suddenly like, well, I was facing the wrong way one time. There was a lot of screaming, and there was like, a flashing light, and like there's no, timeline to that. It's feelings, it's sounds, it's sight, but it's all jumbled.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a coherent, like sense-made memory. And so when I think about things that trigger emotions, the way that like somewhere in my memory does, maybe it's not as effective to make a story that triggers those emotions, or maybe it is. I'm still on the fence on that. Like, because if you remember a story and there's a part in it that makes you emotional, that's the part that you remember, but I don't know whether that means that the rest of the story falls into a timeline or it suddenly is out of sequence.
I have a... Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I have a really good example of this, actually. I just saw The Boy and the Heron yesterday. It's a movie, a new Studio Ghibli movie.
Ooh, okay, nice.
Yes, it's very... I would describe it as a little bit of a fever dream. Okay. It was very good, but very kind of strange. But the beginning of it, I think, really spoke to the way that you can portray that in animation. And I would highly recommend it for that, especially. Like, so the kid, his mom dies in a fire, and he wakes up and Tokyo is burning, and it's like in World War II, and they wake up to the sounds, and they see the hospital that she's in is burning. And he is trying to put on his clothes and run and get out. And his dad's running there in front of him. And you see him go through the crowd of people. And you just see like the animation, like he is crisp and clear. And you can tell what he's doing. And you can kind of tell that, like, you see the kind of like fire, but it's very like almost impressionistic. Like things are kind of stretched and moved. And so you get this feeling of urgency, this feeling of movement, the dynamics of it, but you also like each person that he passes doesn't have a face. Like they're, because that's not what he's thinking about. That's not what he's focused on. His memory is this feeling of movement, you know, the fire and trying to get to his mom. And it's interesting to see in a visual media a way to describe non-visual things that.
God, you remind me so much of something I actually just watched like yesterday.
Yeah.
Is the author of the book Subliminal? I was telling them that it was Subliminal. I can't remember the author's name, of course, but the book Subliminal. And he was talking about the way that we perceive things in the world, because it's, you know, the unconsciousness. Yes, this is my topic, and I was
bring it
off on both topics. So one of the small parts of this was that he was just talking about the visual cortex and how, like, you know, he was showing a picture of like what your visual cortex actually sees in the world, and it's like this distorted picture that's like not what you and I are seeing when we look around, and it's how like you fill in those gaps with like certain things, and it was showing like faces and stuff, and like when you look at this picture, what you're paying attention to and what you're not paying attention to based on like what your brain brings forward. And it's just like interesting when you were talking about the faces and stuff. I was just like, I knew so much of that.
I do a lot of work with domestic violence as well. And how it's kind of like, which is a big trauma, you know, and someone described it, and I can't for the life of me think of who it was, but they described trauma in this way, that you have, it's like, when you have like a piece of paper and you're writing the story of your trauma, right? But instead of having a nice piece of paper, you have Post-it notes, and you write everything down on the Post-it notes, and then a big blast of wind comes in, scatters all the Post-it notes, and then you proceed to try to put them together. And sometimes some get lost, or they get put under a table, and then some of them, they're all kind of out of order, and some are close to order, but some aren't, and like that's what you have now in your memory, and like it's disorganized, and you have all of these miscellaneous things. And I felt like that was such a good visceral way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it is. It gets lost, but then you could find them. You might not, right? They might come. Yeah, you might
maybe
remember.
They come back, maybe you don't.
Maybe you see it differently, and you're like, oh wait, no, that's not the right order. That's not the order, right? And so I think most initial conversations I've ever had with someone that's experienced trauma, usually through domestic violence or sexual violence, it's always a confusion of where to start, right? And I'm always like, start wherever you feel most comfortable, or start wherever you feel like it's most impactful for what you would like to, you know, discuss today or work through today. Yeah. Because, it's like exactly what you said about the accident, right? It's like, tell me what happened, and they just go from whatever point, with a certain point. It's more likely not going to be, well, you know, 4 years ago, you know, I met this person. It's not going to go through that timeline of all the things that led up to that issue. It's going to be whatever was most impactful usually, right? I think people look at trauma as like, trauma was like the experience, but it's like, it's the impact of that experience around the person. It's the impact.
It's the whole story.
Yeah. So whatever you remember will be those impactful pieces, and they will show up as they impact what's most probably impactful to you will be the most vivid, right? Or may not, right? Maybe it's that what you're running from. Maybe that's the harder part to remember. So each person is so different. So it's so hard to navigate, and to have people know how to navigate for that self. And there's a Black Mirror episode about something like this. And I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's basically where you could like almost like child lock your child's like experience through life. And so it's some device where basically a woman had a daughter, and she ended up putting like this child lock mode on like how she navigates the world. And so let's just say she's walking down the street and there's like a dog behind a fence barking really, really aggressively at her. It would actually like blur that image for the child. Gotcha. So it's like the child can only see what the mother thinks is positive for the child to experience. Right. But you don't conceptualize like not having any kind of idea of what so many other experiences are, or things that happen. When you become an adult, it's like, so many gaps, right? There's so many things, because you don't anything like their parents would fight and so they got a divorce. You wouldn't see that, but then you know your parents aren't together anymore, right? So it's like,
it doesn't prepare you.
How did that happen?
There's no context.
There's no context. So this is very interesting.
This reminds me of A Crown of Thorn and Roses.
Yes.
It's like actually a specific part of it, but slash a lot of the book is that, you know, the main character is masked from seeing a lot of like reality, or what reality is for other people. And so, at one point she realizes that, they've put this sort of mask on her, and she's been trying to sneak by this garden, and there's like actually a bunch of fairies out in the garden, and she's like,
there's a glamour.
Yeah, there's a glamour on her. Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, and then when she can see, and then she's just seen parts, and the book kind of like develops so slowly, and it's just like it like unfolds as to what she hasn't seen in this world that's been around her the whole time, and it's like. And it's not like everybody there necessarily is seeing the same thing as everybody else, too. It's just it's so interesting.
Wow.
Different filters.
Yeah.
But also, whatever filter that you have now creates some blind spots for you further down the road.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's why we're always going back. No matter what stage you are, you're going to go back. Because you missed... Going back, you probably missed some things that you're experiencing in the present. And so, like, when you're in the new present, you're also connecting back with those missing people.
You know what was interesting was that, like, and yes, that does close the topic.
I'm sorry.
We keep going. Yeah, we still got time.
Well, you just reminded me of something, is that reading the book, I got to the part where it said that if you want to be able to get those memories that are just the senses and the emotions and stuff, if you want to be able to consolidate that and not be stuck in that feedback loop where you're looping and continually, what is it, was reminisce the right word? Where you're basically stuck in that memory and that memory feels fresh.
Yeah.
When you start having flashbacks and
So that
PTSD
the way
symptoms.
To make it not so fresh is to put words to it so that part of the memory transfers to the other memory bank where there is sense made and where there's a timeline. Because then that part of the brain that integrates all that gets to say, that was then, this is now. That's not happening anymore. We're here now. And then that closes the loop.
Yeah, I think also, like, memory, though, doesn't have to be in that linear side. It's just that it needs to be integrated into your system. And so kind of how I actually think about it is that when you experience things in the world and you form that memory, you integrate it into your mind, into your sense of self. And like, you can recall it, or maybe not. Sometimes it's just sensory, especially when we're babies or really young. We have memories, but not like memories in the same way. It's like still that like body emotion memory.
It's like triggering.
And but when we have like trauma, because like you were saying, everybody's so different, and things that are traumatic to one person might not be for someone else. Even if they're like sitting next to each other in the same car, someone might have, get PTSD and someone might not. But like that trauma like is like a story that now is like stuck in your body. And like that's why like people get like those symptoms that come out. So like you have nightmares, and sometimes your heart just starts pounding, or you're like, you start getting your body just keeps reacting. You're like super hyper alert and blah blah blah. And they kind of, at least right now, the main theory about trying to recover from that is kind of being able to take that kind of out of your body and give it a chance to reintegrate back into you. And you can do that with talk therapies. But one of the big things that they've been talking about recently is sensory motor psychotherapy, which Pat Ogden and Janine Fisher are like two of the big names for that. And it's essentially not talk therapy. You don't need to talk about it or put it into a chronological. You can just re-experience, because sometimes, especially like childhood traumas, or sometimes you'll never get those memories back, but you have that feeling, and you know it's in your body, but you don't know what it is. You don't really know why. And sometimes just giving your body the outlet, or like, so sometimes it's like, I wanted to push him off of me, but I couldn't. And like being able to give your body that sense of pushing or running away, or like being able to end that survival instinct and being able to give it an outlet or address that emotion can kind of allow you to pull it out of yourself and then see it in whatever shape it is, whether it's like sensory, emotion, or it's that memory, like the classic memory that we think about, and then kind of allowing it to reabsorb back into ourselves with less pain.
The trauma you're talking about reminds me so much, I'm sorry, of neuroplasticity.
No, it's absolutely neuroplasticity.
Totally. And I mean, when it happens, I'll go a little bit into the nerdy science of it.
No,
you need to have
all the way in.
You need to have like epinephrine, which is the same thing as adrenaline in your body in order to have neuroplasticity. As an adult, kids, we could talk about that in a second, can get it very easily. But like as an adult, you need to have epinephrine, which comes from your brain. It's adrenaline from your brain.
Yeah.
And you need to have acetylcholine in two different spots, in your forebrain and in your brainstem. And what it does is it makes your body like hyper alert, and it like floods your brain with like these chemicals so that it can like it's like the focus of your brain, and it's how your brain can change. So as an adult, without those things, you cannot have neuroplasticity. So they're like required for us to have it. So like if you're going through things in like a mundane way, you will never rewire your brain. Like you have to have this like alertness and stuff. And so when you have a trauma, it can actually, even as an adult, happen in like one instance that you change your brain. And kids, I mean, they can have neuroplasticity without all of this stuff. They can have it with, up until puberty, just like see something and it's like, boom, in them permanently. And so like to rewire that, which we can, which is why I like had it as a topic as host. Absolutely. It's just like, but it's not like, think that it's, I don't feel like, I'm claustrophobic and I'm always like, this is ridiculous. Like, you're not going to die. You're in a bathroom stall. But it's like, no matter how much you think about it, it doesn't matter because it's like in your brain and body. It's in you.
Yeah, your body is normally responding to it in that way. So it's just going to naturally respond to it.
Yeah. Like your body's trying to tell something. It's speaking to
that's
you.
To me, that's trauma. And even like even with physical health too, right? Your body is telling you something is wrong, and you have to respond. And if you don't, it'll show up differently, right? I say that all the time. People, like I get it's so hard, right? And you never tell anyone to like go into your trauma. Right? There's various ways to heal for each person and what they need based on where they're at, who they are. But suppressing and attempting to forget, when that comes back on later in life, it could come out in so many different ways that you never predicted, and then trying to recover from that, then plus all the things that led up to that is so much harder. Granted, some people need to be on that journey too, because that's just the timeline that they
have. Body never forgets.
The body will never forget.
But what I love about neuroplasticity is that the body might not forget, but you can retell the story in a way that your body can be like, okay, moving on.
Yeah. Or correct it, or in the story. Like, I think you had said something and I written it.
Or change the story.
Change the wiring.
Change the wiring.
Yeah.
It was like, name it, claim it. And then,
instead of plugging it here, putting it in this other, Yeah, and you can change this. You can always change the story, and I think
so. As an example, because this might sound like an easier thing to do or like a nebulous thing to do. Right. So it would be something like if I dealt with anxiety because I feel like I surround myself in a context where there's always somebody who's going to hate on me for just being right.
Yeah.
I've retold that story to myself as I enjoy my haters because
reframing.
I look forward to disappointing them.
Yeah.
If I do me and I am doing well, it's going to disappoint them.
Right.
Which I very much look forward to.
It's that validation. It's that automatic. I must be doing exactly what my values are. Right. I'm living into myself, my values.
Right.
If they're upset.
Yeah. I like to do it with self-esteem a lot. That's what I work with for people. And, sometimes it's like telling, like, it sounds so cheesy. I don't know if you ever saw that SNL skit where, like, I'm a good, like, you stand in front of the mirror and you say affirmations to yourself and you're like, and gosh darn it, people like me. I can't remember all he says. But I think about that, like, sometimes you need to do that. And it sounds super, super cheesy, but it actually does work for a lot of people. And sometimes I think I heard about this, and I also should suggest this, especially for people who are like, I'm not going to stand in front of the mirror and tell myself I'm beautiful because A, I don't believe it, and B, that's stupid. And you're like, well, I know it feels stupid, but it will help. But sometimes, like, it's just integrating it and like being sarcastic to yourself. So like when you do something and you be like, oh man, I'm so stupid.
Right.
Instead of saying that, be like, man, you're so smart.
Yeah.
And like just being sarcastic at yourself and just being like, genius. And then, like, even though it's like you're being sarcastic to yourself, you use those positive language.
Yeah.
And like sometimes just that can be the first start of like start having positive self-talk.
Yeah.
And like everybody and any therapy modality, like you have to tailor it to yourself and tailor it to the individual because we're all different. And like people like EMDR, some people respond really well. And then some people are like, why do you keep moving your finger? It's just weird, you know, like, but like sometimes it's like, or deep breathing. Like I do a lot of deep breathing. And sometimes for some people, it makes them feel more anxious. If I do like the 4-4-4 where you breathe for 4, hold for 4, you know, let it out for 4. But sometimes it's like, well, you know, this type of breathing helps or this type of that. Or like if I rock, that helps. And like, just sometimes it's just trying things.
You have to try it because it's not going to feel right for you. And then if you've done
and if it doesn't work, keep moving.
Then you're like, I don't want, this doesn't work. Then I can't heal. Or people almost like write it off. Or it's like, you know what? That therapy didn't work for me. So clearly this is where I'm at. Right. Or it's like, well, there's so many things to try.
Yeah. That's so interesting. You just made me realize that I did that.
Oh, I've 100%. Done it. Oh, 100. That was me. You know,
it's easy.
I was a psychology student. I was doing all the things, and I was like, no, this doesn't work.
I was like, I'm just different. Mine's just.
I got it all in here. Like, I'm just going to heal myself and just keep working. You know, the more honest with myself I can be, I can heal myself through anything.
Right? I'm like, it's not that bad. I'll be fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, nope.
And you got to take the things that work for you and leave the rest.
Yeah.
And like everybody, like that's why I think as a clinician, especially like one of the things I think about is like you have to have a toolbox approach because not everybody's a nail.
Yeah.
And so you can't use a hammer because this person's a screw and this person like it, you know, this board is different, you know, like every project is different. You can't use the same tool for every project. Same as you can't use the same tools for people. Like we all are individuals. We have our own experiences and thoughts and you know, our modalities have to be just as different and adaptable as our people.
Yeah. Culture
and ourselves.
Right? You never know how people
and culture.
Things, right?
That's even more so. Like you can't put like Western or like white values on something that is from a different culture because sometimes they just don't align.
Well, the filters don't align, but also
they think about things different.
We are all human beings, but we are all definitely built differently.
Right.
So there's got to be an acknowledgement of both.
Right.
Even color, like people, like there's been a lot of studies as far as like how people experience color and the fact that like different cultures name colors different. And like there's like a classic Greek example that they say like it was like wine colored and you're like wine colored. I would not describe the sea anywhere near wine colored, but like why would someone describe it like that? You know, because they saw colors differently because they had a different cultural interpretation of color, which seems so like of course, like, doesn't that make sense? But every culture experiences. So sometimes the way we talk and with our culture,
we do. Things being sweet and savory and all sorts of stuff.
What's good, like cheese, is kind of weird. Fermented food,
like
kimchi. Like I love kimchi, but a lot of people don't like kimchi, and you're like, or like natto. Like I'm not a big fan of natto. But, like, a lot of people won't even try it, you know.
What is natto?
Natto, it's fermented soybeans. It's very popular in Japan, but it's kind of got, like, a slimy texture. It's fermented, so it's got that, like, kind of sour, cheesy.
Yeah.
But, like, it could be...
I'll try it.
Yeah, like, but some people are like, I don't even want to try it because, like, that's weird, you know. But everybody's got a different sense of what's good and what they like. And,
I will say one thing. Just to, I know.
It's our favorite topic.
I feel so bad. I'm only doing this because it's such an emotional catch for me when someone said something at some point. So I don't know how to go back there.
Go
about rewriting your own ending. And there is a movie called Gully, and I say this with a warning, as I've said before. I recommend movies, and people often will tell me that they're sad or depressing, and I didn't give them that warning, but. This movie is about like 3 boys growing up in California and like how they navigate who they become as adults based on like all their trauma. And just one of the stories in there was so impactful to me just because there is a very triggering story of one of the males that experiences abuse. And it's interesting because they depict him like going through an abusive experience, and he's gonna be like almost like he's stuck, like frozen, right? He's in that freeze mode where things happening to him. And they kind of replay like what he's thinking about in his mind, and all he's thinking about in his mind is the initial situation in his life where like that trauma started. And this is like I'm trying to give like too much away, but this is a boy that was basically like kidnapped from his mom, like he's removed from his mother at some point at like maybe the age of like 4, maybe 5, and so like it's like a laundromat. His mom goes to get some change, and then like some man comes, picks him up, and like literally walks out with him, right? So then he never sees her again. He's up until this point, he's probably like 16 or 17 at this point, and it's like he replays that moment in his mind almost like every moment of his life. Like that's where he's stuck. Loop. Yeah, that loop is so, because it's the only moment, I think the last positive maybe experience he had, the last moment he was with someone that he knew or he loved, because outside of it, he's now with this situation of abuse, like, and that's where his life has been for the last 17 years. But towards the end, like some things happen and he finally like completes that story. He plays it again, and then he plays it with like his mom coming back, him being able to reunite with her, and then he screams, and like it's this moment of like truly cathartic. And it's like 16, well, let's say 10 years of living in almost like a frozen, disassociated state of, he even went mute, like he was not speaking. So you didn't even know that he could speak during the movie. You just didn't know what happened. And so he had literally not spoken probably for 10 years. Oh wow. And then it's when he let that scream out, it was like, because he finally could connect that, so he could finish it, move forward. And it was so wild to just, it's a very impactful story.
How do you spell it?
A Gully.
It kind of reminds me of internal family systems therapy. Like that kind of like retelling and exploring the different parts of yourself, and then retelling the story, like reintegrating with those parts.
Yeah, what you would need to heal from, even if it's not real, right? Because that didn't happen.
Yeah, even if it's not real, like being able to re-edit the story in your mind, like because you know the true outcome, but like also just within your imagination, giving yourself a better outcome.
In the book, we didn't pick the kite runner, though. But I was thinking, that's like straight up. Trauma, and then overcoming it at the end.
It's honestly like connecting with your needs. Honestly, it's like that. I didn't realize how many people do not know what they need or don't even know how to develop what it is that they needed. And so it's like in that moment, it's like he needed to be reunited with his mother. Like at the end of the day, that's what he needed. He may not ever get it, but that made him believe that like. And honestly, she's still alive. At that point, the movie kind of ended. So it's like, you don't know what could have happened. But at the end of the day, that's what he realized. I needed, there was that comfort, right? Or I needed that reassurance that I was going to be back where I was safe, or safety, right? Safety is a huge one. So it's like different ways you can get people to connect with their needs is like the most powerful thing, I think, in that healing journey, which is really hard to do sometimes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're going to put a pause on this.
Yes.
Before the next roll.
We're all chatty, so.
I love it.
Talk your ear off about all these topics.
I know.
It also helps we're all like different sides of like a similar enough field.
I think we've touched on all the topics, actually.
Yeah, honestly.
I have a quick ad to read off. Or not really read off, but like to let people know that. And then we'll do the next roll, which I'm very excited. Like, this is a great conversation, guys. Thank you.
I can only imagine it's going to keep going.
I love hearing from you guys. Like, it's really interesting to see how you like see the world. And
so, what's the name of this podcast again? Oh,
Tavern Stories.
Tavern Stories. Thank you. Tavern Stories is sponsored by Divergent Art Styles. If you go into the show notes, you can find the Etsy page for Divergent Art Styles, and what you'll be able to see when you go there is all the merch for the podcast. So if you want to fan out this stuff, there's like take some, like a whole stack of things. Ooh. So Divergent Art Styles has an array of Tavern Stories mugs and notebooks and stickers,
swag shirts,
and let's see what else.
I love the size of these.
Isn't it great?
That's so fun. Look.
Yes.
Yeah. So, like, you got the orange one, you've got the green one.
I love that.
What?
There's also jackets.
What? It's like a bomber jacket. This is reminding me of the 80s.
You meet in a tavern. I love that.
Yeah. So the jackets come in green and gray.
Cool.
Ooh,
yeah.
Oh, wow. What's this one?
This is my
like
favorite
it?
piece. This is my favorite thing.
Here, I'll help you.
So, like, no kidding.
Oh, look at the blanket.
Yes.
That's so pretty.
So
It's got that, like,
soft.
Yes.
nice Sherpa.
yeah.
I like that. Cute.
Fun.
I'm a sucker
I know.
for a
Yeah.
blanket.
Emily, you
And
So the mugs also in front of you are the ones that say telling on one side,
Oh,
but
see the side.
to your left, Shayna, is another mug,
Telling.
and what that one has, because that one's
Yeah.
different.
Oh,
it's like a frosted.
I didn't even see that
yeah.
one.
Yeah, the frosted mug has listening on the other side. And for
Ooh.
communication to happen, you need someone
Listening
who's
to.
listening as
to.
well as somebody who's talking. So,
Love that.
so now
Love
you got
that.
the whole...
I bet that one would be really good to put in the freezer.
Yeah.
And then put your beer in it.
I like the heft of it. I think it's also really cool
Oh, yeah.
that it looks like it's got this very cold look to it.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't it? It looks like, ooh, yes, frosty.
Yeah. I have. So there's also an array of sticker ribbons that are going to start circulating. So,
Okay.
so what the game is if you ever see these ribbons at a convention, the ribbons they come in light green and dark green and light orange and dark orange. If you see somebody with a dark of either a color,
Yeah.
then you give them the light of the other one. So,
Oh.
for instance, if you see the dark orange one, it'll say, "Are you ready?" which is part of the song.
Oh.
And then the light orange one says, "You meet in a tavern." So
Oh, cool.
it's kind of like if you see these different ribbons going around,
Yeah.
it's like passing, it's like when a story passes from one person to another.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
cool. My husband goes to a lot of conventions, so
Yeah.
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 not as many as you, but
I'll give a handful of them. So, like, if you want
I get
to play
too
this game-
lonely
I
when
literally
you
was
leave.
talking
Yeah.
to your husband about them, and he gave me all of them. I was like, let me write these down because there's so many. It was like
Yeah.
one in Atlanta about dragons, and I was like, what? Tell me more.
Gen Con is the big one
Yes.
in the summer.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm hoping to go this year. Are you going?
Yes.
That's awesome.
So maybe I'll see you because I'm like I've been wanting to go for years. And there's a steakhouse out there. It's not almost steakhouse.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be. Have you been there?
Outstanding.
It's supposed to be so good. And every year I hear all of my friends go and enjoy it. And I'm like, I haven't been able to go out there. So I'm hoping to try to make it out there this year.
That's awesome. What a
Yeah.
connecting piece.
Yeah.
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 That's so fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
Also, because it's December and Christmassy, the Etsy page is going to come out with a line of red sweatshirts that can be worn under their jackets. So if you want to do the colors, then you
Ooh, fun.
can. One of them is going to be a crop top sweater.
Oh.
Let's see, I love a crew neck. Listen, it's like my favorite thing to put on. So.
And I'm hoping, this is a hope against hope, but if I can get some pictures together, there might be a calendar.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay.
Because December, you're going to have to start buying calendars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe. Yeah.
It'll have like all your recommendations in it.
Oh,
cool.
So
That's cool.
yeah,
Whoa, that's actually really cool. You can like
Yeah.
pair toward the month. I don't know if that's. I don't know. Maybe like more just holiday thing. I don't know. But yeah.
New Year's resolution kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
so
Yeah, thank
basically-
you for the assist.
Yeah, so it'd be like, hey,
Cool.
January,
Oh, a planner?
go look at Subliminal, or check out
Ooh.
Gully and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Right.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yes.
Oh, a lit. Yeah.
Whoa.
I like
I
it.
like.
You need to have a Goodreads for the podcast. Like
That should be a thing.
Yeah.
a Goodreads for the Tavern stories, and then like all the stories that everybody brings up gets updated as like.
Yeah.
I like this idea.
That would be so
You
fun.
can think about
And then-
reviews there too.
Yeah. So reviews, or like if we take like these, cool pieces of paper,
Right.
Yeah.
write out individually what your Goodreads would be, and I could post it on
Yeah.
Instagram so that if people
Yeah.
are like, hey, got you on
Yeah.
what is it, Court of Thorns and Roses, then you've got the one place to go where you know that everybody's like, I took your recommendation and loved it.
Yeah. Or you can there's discussions in there too. So, or I don't know if you want to bring them back. There's right, all the things, right? Then you can either start connecting there, or you can say, hey, do you want to come in and y'all all talk about that,
Yeah.
at one time?
My-
and
100%.
brings people together.
My friend Katrina just got me back onto Goodreads.
Oh, there you
She
go.
was like, I love Goodreads, and now I've been trying to like update. Some people are like, this is really cool. I'm like, to the Goodreads.
Yeah, it's a good place. It's a good
I'm like, okay.
Well,
to have.
the last thing that I'll throw out there in the ad basically is, and this one's not about the Etsy page, but it's about the Discord behind me. So because the season ends for Tavern Story in December,
Yeah.
all the way up until season 2. I'm curious if people would be able to jump into Discord and start a table about whatever story they want to gush about.
Mm-hmm.
And if people start coming to your table and start talking about stuff, you'll get notifications in your email saying, you got a new comment on Dresden Files or something like that.
That'd be cool.
And I think that's just makes this a place, like, if you can't find anybody to talk to about C,
then, right,
throw out, your thoughts.
Tell us about your stories.
Listen, there's so many things you can do with that. Honestly, because it just brings it back to so many students have a struggle with connecting with other people, right?
Yeah.
Definitely in the area, especially if we're coming from out of state or just finding things to nerd out about.
Just in general,
Right, and where you can just find it, see it, and just giving it just another platform where people can come and connect.
Yeah.
And on things like this, and maybe meet in person afterwards or not, whatever they're comfortable with.
Yeah, I mean that it can be the meet in person thing, or you can meet online thing, because it's also got video and audio if you want to do that. You can post when you two are going to be online, so you can finally have a real-time chat or something like that. But for me, it's I've got at least a couple of people Warhammer-ish to connect with on there. So it's one of those if between seasons you just can't find anybody to nerd out about neuroplasticity or something like that, check out the Goodreads, or check out the Instagram, or check out whatever it is that you want to be able to bring to or having seen this show, jump on there, gush about it. And
absolutely,
please do that.
Cool.
I'm trying to learn from you more.
I'm learning from you.
It can happen anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
All right, so let's do another roll. Let's check it out.
Okay.
Let's see what we get.
Oh, can I give these back to you?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to start writing on them. Then they're coming home with me. I didn't bring a big bag. I brought my little bag, so that's going to be hard to sneak out. All right. Did you want to roll, or do you want me to roll?
I think it's probably easier for you. I'm okay with it, but I appreciate it.
Do you want to roll?
I'll do it. Yeah. I love rolling dice.
I do too. I'm like, yeah. I got a 3 again, baby.
And you got a 9.
Is that a 6 or a 9?
I thought it was a 9. But
no, it won't be a 9 because it's
all about
it's an 8. I was like, wait.
I was thinking, is that the line?
I was like, whoa, a 9.
All right, so what was it that you got?
I got a 3.
You got a re-roll because we already did 3.
Okay. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's underneath
no. I can't. Can you grab it?
1,
Here,
I think.
hand me this one. I'll roll yours.
Oh, do you want me to read it? Oh, okay.
4.
4.
Did we do 4?
We have not done 4. All right. So,
thank you.
I'm trying to get it.
So for the story, you got Adventure Zone.
Oh yeah.
Actually, no, hold on.
Sorry.
Topic.
For topic.
I didn't realize I got them mixed up when you were saying it. I thought it was stories and topics,
okay.
So that's why. So
for topics, I leave it to you guys. Do you want to do Subconscious Mind?
Yeah.
Or do you want to do Adventure Zone for topic?
Either one. Honestly.
Subconscious Mind might be easier.
Do Subconscious Mind and pair that up with C. C is the story that we close it with.
Okay. Ooh. Though I will say the Adventure Zone also highly recommend. Yeah. You should listen to it.
All for it.
Especially if you kind of like
is it the podcast?
Yeah, it's a podcast. If you like just silly humor.
Let's do this. Let's see if we can get all 3 of them to get connected in the conversation. Subconscious Mind.
I can
start with that.
I can add it.
We can do this.
Don't worry, I got it. I think I'm the only one with the Adventure Zone on here, but I can add it. Don't worry.
So it's basically going to go this way.
But I would, when we were talking about C before, I was also thinking about the rock climbing.
Okay.
And just how, oh
my God, the rock one scene in there.
Yeah.
I didn't even see it, but I was thinking about it, and I was like, whoa, how interesting would it be to rock climb? And
even their opening scene. Sorry, I'm like,
yeah.
We'll get there.
Sorry.
Wait, I want to hear.
No, I'm sorry. Don't worry.
I know we're like,
I want to hear about Subconscious Mind. So okay.
We're
eventually going
Subconscious Mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about it quite a bit already, but I'm just going to tell one thing about this. It was the book Subliminal that I read that stood out to me. It was at the beginning of the book. It's kind of the thing that got me hooked, and it tells this story about this guy that was blind. His visual cortex in his brain, he'd had a stroke. It first was in one half of his brain, then it turned out both halves of the brain, so his visual cortex was completely destroyed and he couldn't see anything, but his occipital lobe was fine. So visual cues were like getting through his brain, but he couldn't see anything or perceive anything. And so they started because they did the brain scan, this was 2000, I can't remember, 2001, 2000s.
Right.
Since they could tell that his, occipital lobe was intact and he was getting information, they were like, let's do some tests. They started trying these different tests, and then one of the ones they did was they put him in this hallway and put a whole bunch of objects in the hallway and had him walk down the hallway, and he dodges all these objects, right? But he doesn't see anything. When they interview him and ask him why he did what he did, he doesn't know why he did what he did. They tested it again. And
he has instincts.
It was like his brain had that information and had processed it, but it just was not in his conscious mind why he was avoiding it.
Interesting.
And the power of the brain, if that
It's
doesn't
give you memory.
No.
No.
Seeing or
No, it's not selective.
It's because he's never experienced that exact scenario.
You're just you're not being able to use your sense. You just have an internal sense, almost like where your body is in space.
Yeah.
And it's just an innate sense. It's not that you're thinking about, my hands here, but
you just go into a part of your brain that's
the seeing is going
conscious.
into that subconscious instead of you're not actually seeing, you can't see colors or see people or things.
Right.
He just kind of knows.
Yeah,
it's around
your body. Some part of your maybe it's the part
the wires
that connects to your body.
The wires
moving that knows
connected the way that they are generally
connected, right?
Yeah. So it's just
isn't
that wild? I've heard similar stories about that.
There's other ones too. There's plenty of stories about that.
Yeah.
It's just that just makes you think about how much your mind is capable of.
Yeah.
I mean,
the brain is fascinating.
Yeah,
your body is really.
It really is. Yeah.
So I get reminded of the fact that we are perpetually receiving signals. Perpetually receiving signals. When you're a kid, you're receiving signals that you're in. It's sitting in your head, and once there's context to throw it against, then it becomes a thing that means something.
Yeah.
So the fact that, for instance, if you're not making eye contact with a person in the same conversation as you, they don't feel seen. But you could still be talking to them.
Right.
But if they don't make eye contact with you, and maybe there's a nervousness or something like that, then there is something that you receive as a feeling, and it's not something that they're giving you, it's something that you are processing.
It's also cultural, for some people, if you're in trouble and you're looking at that person, you're looking a child looking at the parent who's yelling at you, for a lot of Americans, you're supposed to look at that person, and when you look away, it's seen as disrespectful. But in a lot of other cultures, is you're not supposed to look at them. And so sometimes our cultural context also changes the way that we we can have the same stimuli, but we would process it differently, because of our cultural backgrounds.
But so if someone were to ask you about that, subconscious receiving and processing of things, but you don't know how to put it into words. I mean, it's one of those hey, you seemed a little bit off in the room. Was it something anyone said? And you're I don't know. That's usually the first sentence that comes out is, I'm not quite sure how to describe it.
Yeah.
Or I don't know. Or I'm not sure what it was. There's just this feeling.
Or even the person saying you seem a bit off. It's why do you think I'm off?
Yeah.
Was I off?
It's I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the way your eyes
what made me seem off? Yeah. What about my behavior or affect made you think I was off? Maybe that's just me. But it could be disassociation. There's so many things, right, that it could.
Sometimes I think people are mad at me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I have this feeling am I annoying? Am I just being a pain in the butt? Am I just annoying to everybody? And sometimes it's just a feel. Yeah, like you said, it's just a feeling, or I'm paying too closely attention to the undercurrent. And this kind of reminds me of something that I talked to a friend about, that women especially talk in that you have kind of what's being said, but then you have the undercurrent.
100%.
And different cultures talk more or less in that range as well. But like, especially in our culture, like women talk that way, and like it's all about tone and how you said it and what was the context around where you said it, and like did you say it in this way, and like and different areas talk differently. Like I've noticed like this, like my family is kind of from like the South and the Southwest, and so like you use different terms, or like you kind of talk around things. And instead of like saying something straight to the point, so like you might not necessarily want to be like seen in a certain way, so you might be like, oh, like the misunderstood one is, I feel like, is bless your heart, right? So, and everybody talks about it, but unless you actually use it in your vernacular, I don't think people truly actually understand it, because bless your heart is also something you can say sincerely.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not always meaning that you're a dumbass. It can also be like, oh, bless her heart, that's so sad. Like, but it can also be like, and that's what makes it that undercurrent, is because you have to know the context.
Right.
Because sometimes when people say bless your heart, they do mean, oh, wow, you're not the bread, the sharpest crayon in the box. Like, what's going on? Like,
it's like what's familiar.
There's a context. But I noticed, like, especially like men talk usually a little bit more bluntly, and so like there's not usually much of an undercurrent. What they say is what they mean, and sometimes to varying levels. But I find women talk a lot more.
So where does this store, like all this information in the subconscious, like where does it all reside?
They don't know. We don't know a lot about the brain. But no, they don't. No. I mean, you're getting like they said they estimate 11 million bits per second, and we can perceive 16 to 50.
I want someone to I want to
you
put
would
it in
overload and die. Like your brain would just fry if it tried to do that.
No, I want to see what my brain activity looks. I just feel like I think too. I mean, I say too much, but like I don't think it's too much, because I feel like, again, I like knowledge. So.
I mean, think about everything around us, the temperature, the way we're moving, the way that she's sitting, the way that the ceiling is. Like, I mean, everything.
Yeah, it's like hyper-awareness. So I think that's where I talk about my dog is like that. It's weird because she's so hyper-aware, and you can see it. She'll sit there. I mean, every little thing, she's constantly looking around, and it's almost like she has this I call it unrealistic fear, just because I've had her since she was 8 weeks old. So like, I know she has not personally experienced any trauma, or trauma that I will not say that she's experienced trauma. But then I started going to like, do dogs have generational trauma? And like, what is that? Because there's very much clearly a living fear and like an awareness that like, she's always alert that someone's going to harm her, but like, she's never been harmed, but she's also so loving. It's like she wants to know that she can trust you. Yeah. But it's weird that like, I do analyze my dog this way. Yes. Because a living thing I look at is like, where's this coming from? But if you've met her, you will see the animation in her personality and her awareness of things. Even my brother brought it up to me that she looks in the mirror often and just will stare at herself, and then she'll readjust. Like, and that's why he started to believe me finally. Right? Like, she is actually very self-aware. I know. I don't know enough about the animal brains and how that works, and I would like to know if there's a lot of similarities there. But it's
I mean, even the like range that I just gave, the 16 to 50. I mean, like, but who knows how many things dogs are perceiving? You know, it might be like 3, and that's like one thing's hyper aware. But like, I kind of wonder too if this has something to do with like ADD or ADHD. I wonder if those people perceive 50 things.
Honestly, I perceive 16 ADHD, because even with the wind, if a leaf blows, she's always making sure like that. It's and she's it could be the paper bag. It doesn't matter what it is. It's like, I just got to make sure I know what's going on around me at all times.
And we all know there's people we walk around with, or maybe you're one of them that sees, like, I mean, my husband's just like, oh, did you see that? I'm like, no, I like looking at the sidewalk.
Right, like, I'm focused on here. Or like military, like you're trained sometimes, but you're so heavily trained to be so hyper aware of everything around you or your team, just to ensure you know what's going on, you know how to respond and how to react. And it's like, I wonder how much like people maybe succeed in that better just because they have that maybe you're ADHD or ADD. Maybe that is a better skill that you might have, or maybe it doesn't hinder it maybe a little bit. But I'm always wondering to see how those things connect with how we.
And you mentioned generational trauma. Like they're showing that part of it is also passed down. Like, there is an element that's passed down in culture. Oh yeah. But there's also elements that they're finding are passed down in our genes.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That that events can be passed down, and like especially through maternal lines, because when you think about it, like when women, their eggs you're born with all the eggs that you're ever going to have. And so when your mom is in your grandmother's body, the egg part of you is being developed. So at one point, a part of you was in your grandmother.
Yeah.
Like, and that, like, things that affected your grandmother, like the cortisol levels and the other, the other, like, hormones and changes and trauma that she might have experienced in the way that it lives in their body, it affects all of those genes that are in your mother and in you that you then pass down to your children.
Right.
And, like, and so on and so on. But, like, it's just very fascinating.
So deep. And like you were saying, we know that you can change that to people. I think there was a sense that, like, it's just within you, right? You're born with it. It's a part of you, and it's true. But then we're also learning you can actually not necessarily reverse it, but you can work through and kind of, it is almost kind of like recalibrate that it doesn't continue on. Right? There's so many different aspects of that too. So.
Yeah, like they've shown with adverse childhood experiences with the ACEs study, and then they've duplicated it in different ways, but how much, like, just like early childhood adversity can really alter the way that your health later in life. But they've been able to connect it with different mental illnesses as well, but like just like cardiac issues. Like if you have a higher ACE score, it's out of 10. You have a higher likelihood to have like cardiac issues or other things, and sometimes it lives in your body in that way. But I think how I kind of like to describe it with people is, have you ever done like the hand model of the brain?
What?
The hand model of the brain.
No, what is that?
This is a good tool for like when, at least as far as like my job, which is like they take a little bit of the neuroscience and then you have to like kind of like put it into like context that people can actually like associate. But essentially like you have like the brain stem and then your thumb is the amygdala, and it's like which is like your sense of danger, and it's like normally it's just kind of like in the middle, and then you have the prefrontal cortex that comes over top of it, and it kind of like in a normal system your amygdala is your like alert system that tells you when danger is happening or something, like there's a bear.
Yeah.
Oh God, run, right? And so it starts going off. It alerts the prefrontal cortex, which is your thinking, logical brain, right?
The rational brain.
The rational one that comes in and goes, okay, we need to make a plan, right? Or it's like, you thought it was a bear, but it wasn't a bear. Don't worry, we can start to calm that system, right? And so, but if that bear, and this is the issue that we get a lot with traumatic, especially like complex PTSD and or domestic violence, where you have people who like the bear lives with you,
right?
You know, the bear is always there, and so you're in constant danger. And after a while, that amygdala knows that why do I need to like talk to the prefrontal cortex? Because I know that it's a bear.
Yeah.
I keep talking and we keep saying the same thing. Why don't I just do a shortcut, right? The brain loves shortcuts. So at some point it's just like, and it just keeps going. And then you get stuck in that routine. And so your body goes from 0 to 60 with triggers.
Yeah.
And that's why people get triggered. Whereas you kind of have to start being like, I think about, this is something I've thought about. But like, you also have like this finger is kind of tied, right? It's part of that prefrontal cortex, but it's also a little bit kind of closer to the thumb.
Yeah.
It's the noticing brain. It's that part that like makes you aware of your body, aware of your hands, aware of your deep breathing, right? That's still online a little bit. Like you start losing some of it, but you still are able to use it. But you got to exercise that muscle to be able to use it while you're in panic mode. And then that can help you slowly bring that prefrontal cortex back online, which is essentially what they try to do with DBT and the other modalities. And that helps you bring that prefrontal cortex. And so it gives it a hug again and goes, it's okay, we're good. But sometimes you have to engage slowly getting this. So it'll eventually come back online and get that prefrontal cortex initiating again to get that logic side on top of the emotion side, because you need both. You can't live in one or the other.
So I would love a study to be done as people are watching romance movies, or shows, or reading romance novels. to find out whether, like, if there is a romance story that triggers them in a certain way, like, you know, reminds them of a breakup or reminds them about, you know, the loved one that got, you know, is lost or not calling anymore or whatever the case is, whether that, when that floods the body initially with like the oh shit chemicals, does the noticing part of the brain activate and say, no, this is fiction, or no, this is not you, it's them. Like, I want to know whether, like, even if it's a story that's happening to somebody else, does your brain process it? Because those of us that have the power of sympathy or empathy, or, you know, like, are we going through all those same processes at the same time? And going through the de-escalation in our brain and in our body, or does it like carry on and be like, I really hated how that love story panned out, because that for some reason that's sticking with me, and that noticing brain is not chilling me out.
I feel like that's me. I feel like that's all I feel like. I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like when I watch things, I'm like, that's actually probably not having a lot of information, right? I think I sought out any depiction of something that I could dissect or better understand, even if I was outside of myself. And so every story I would see, I would either compare it to my experience or not, or then I would see outside of myself. Like, even if I experienced this thing, wow, look at the other ways people experience that too. So it was like, it could have, well, for me, I guess it's both. If it's super direct, I will go through them. Like, I will maybe go through those motions, but then also sometimes, right. Or sometimes when I've noticed there's a lot of people who cannot, like, if they're watching something that was relevant to their experience, it's like, it's a deflection. I've actually seen someone truly, like, their brain, it's almost like it went back to that self-protective mode of, like, when the reality started to hit, or when like that healing or almost like awareness started to really come to the light, for like finally allowed itself to like show itself. It's like the brain almost like pushed it to forget, or like the next day, like, we got into a certain point, and then the next day they had not even remembered that we had gotten to that point, because they couldn't, like, almost like they couldn't live in that reality. It was too much for them, and they had conditioned themselves as a child to forget the things that caused them the most distress, or
to dissociate.
Right. So it's almost like surviving. It's how they survive. I mean,
it's how they survive,
right? It's a surviving factor. I think that's where I think of multiple personalities. I do think I'm bringing it into that, which is not the topic we're going into. But that's how I saw
it's dissociative.
Alters forming, right? It's like, this is how I can protect myself.
It's a break. Yeah.
And that's why I think I loved it. I was like, the fact that you could go through something that was so disruptive, and instead of it causing you to maybe want to use substances to forget, maybe want to create self-harm to forget, or do the other things that maybe other people might
sometimes
engage in.
Sometimes they do that with the idea too.
No, for sure, right? And then some can, some in co-occurring can develop this alter of protection. It's like your brain truly develops another personality with new skills and things. That it's not just a new
personality, though. It's a personality
identity.
With a whole
history. It's identity. Yeah, it's a whole identity.
A whole, and
it's skills that
can be radically different.
That's why it's so wild. And
I wonder if it's like you are like empathetic. You said you're an empath.
Yeah. Oh, I feel too much.
You feel things a lot. We talked about neuroplasticity and how you have to have the epinephrine and the acetylcholine in order to have neuroplasticity. So if you're reading a book, for it to, I feel like, change you, you have to have those things. So that means you have to be alert and like actively involved in the process. And I wonder if like people like you who are a little bit more, you know, able to get into it, are able to have that impact them more and like change the story.
And I'm not sure. To it almost like people. I think I didn't realize that other people didn't do. In my mind, I was like, oh, people don't do that. Like that's why I think I had to check myself very quickly. Like people don't like to engage in their trauma, right? Because it's very hard and painful. For me, it was like, but then how am I going to understand it, right? If I don't feel, I'd rather dive into it, and I'll go into that too. If we get to anger or we don't, that's perfectly okay. But I think for me, it's like, I cannot live in anger. I cannot, like, that is too high of emotion for me because I feel so deeply. I had to process it into what was really going on with the sadness. So it's like, if I can get to the sadness, I can process through that. But I can work through sadness. So sadness is a comfortable place.
I feel the opposite.
Yeah, and I've known most people actually are kind of the opposite.
I find anger to be easier to deal with than sadness.
I think I've actually met more people in life that operate in that way. And it's all right for the person, right? For each individual, whatever helps you get through whatever. And doing it at such a young age, now it's like it's almost, not like I run to it, but like I almost need it. It's like,
place.
I like feeling what I feel, because if not, I'm just going to live in it. So I'd rather not live in this forever. So I'd rather live in it for a minute or an hour or a week before, right? Rather than 20 years. And so I think that reality of like, I'd rather give me a month of pain versus a lifetime of pain. And so I'll work through it enough to be able to process it to move forward.
I think that takes a lot of strength too. Like that really speaks to your character too. Because I think, I mean, it doesn't feel like, I know it's your own lived experience, but like, it really does take a lot of strength to like face head on things. Mm. And I think people in and of themselves are never that logical. And because our minds aren't really that logical. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a dialectical nature. Mm-hmm. And that, like, we are kind of like, yes, and like, I feel this and this. Yeah. And like, you can be sad and angry, and you can be anything in between. You can be all these things at once. And being able to have that, I think is so important. And like, and I think that also speaks to like, kind of that unconscious mind of sometimes we do things with our conscious mind and our unconscious mind at the same time. And that creates this weird dichotomy that like, there's a book called The Unsayable, which I felt like it's a lot of trauma dumping for me. I hear enough about people's stuff that I felt like it was a little, but it does really speak to a really interesting point that like, sometimes people, when they act one way, but they want something else secretly in their heart. Mm-hmm. And so like, there's a scene where the girl, like, she's hurting herself, to feel something, to feel okay. Right. And it's a reenactment of something traumatic that happens to her, and she doesn't want people to know. So she hides the blood, but she hides it, at the foot of her bed on the sheets that she knows that her mom washes. Mm-hmm. And so there's this, like, she's hiding it. She doesn't want people to know, but she also, puts it in a place that silently the subconscious is also trying to speak out that, like, she wants someone to know. And then, like, there's a lot of stories, and that's kind of what the book's about, is that, like, sometimes there's a piece of your body, like we were talking about Body Keeps the Score. Yeah. There's a piece of your body that's trying to tell the one story, and then your like conscious brain is trying to tell another story. Yeah. And both of them kind of lead you into these weird areas. And sometimes, like, I think when you are more stable and those two are working fairly well together, within a reasonable level, you're kind of like, what are you doing? That doesn't make any sense. You're just crazy, or you're just disobedient, or you're not, you're not compliant with the things that you need to do. And people get these really bad labels, but it's really just when you really look at people, and I think when you have a deeper understanding of them, you can really get to the fact that there are multiple layers, and people aren't always like rational.
So to bring it to C.
I know, I was literally
I'm sorry.
No, I was thinking of all the pieces of, like, maybe the way that blah, 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 are trying to raise his children, like, and all the different
I haven't seen
things
C,
that
so
happen.
So for those that haven't seen C, this won't break the, element of surprise for you. But in this world of blind, there are sighted people getting found. There are children that are getting born with sight.
Interesting.
And anything that has to do with sight by this time is being seen as witchcraft. It's being seen as bad. So when this pair of twins gets born sighted, and it's slowly being found out by the stepfather that these are sighted children, he still considers them like his to protect. So he works hard to, keep under wraps the fact that they are sighted and trying to treat them as blind, but also trying to help them with growing up.
Right?
Even though he's also the one that's blind.
Right.
So when you don't have sight, you have all these other senses to rely on to pull your picture of the world together. Funny enough, picture. Pull your context together about what the world is like.
Yeah.
So you're hyper aware about things like sound. You're hyper aware of things like heat or whatever. So
feeling, yeah.
when you're sighted, I'm wondering whether that blind spot suddenly grows because now you're relying so much on sight that you have so much more signal-wise to juggle.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that was the idea, right? That was almost like a punishment from God, right? That like with the sight, we have destroyed the world, right? We have let our distractions and greed and all the things overcome. And so it's like, how do you get back to connecting outside of without the distraction?
Yeah.
Kind of how you can build more in terms
like the sighted son, he thinks he can fight better because he's sighted.
Right.
But what he actually winds up demonstrating when his stepfather's trying to teach him how to fight is that he's reliant so much on sight that he has forgotten all the other signals that he could be receiving. And he's actually a worse fighter than the blind, fighting machine.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's kind of how I think about it too, is that like, I don't know if it's necessarily like inherently an issue of difference, but I think it's like, I think there's an arrogance that like, oh, I have sight and that's the most important thing. But I think like when you aren't sighted or you have some kind of, difference in that way, like you then have to find new ways to navigate the world. And you have different shortcuts and different things that you utilize. And so I don't necessarily see having sight as a disadvantage or advantage. And there are advantages in some ways. But I think mainly because the world is created for sight, like our world.
Yeah.
And, like I have a really cool classmate who is blind, and like seeing her navigate some of the issues that like you're like, oh hey, they gave her the document for the thing, but she wasn't able to, because it was a PDF, she can't search it with the tools that she uses to go through, but she's able to do like Zoom, like everything's on Zoom, but we have to have the cameras on. I'm like, it doesn't matter. But like, and like but it changes that, like you were talking about with the culture there. Like I noticed that like when I talk to her, I have to be very diligent to like say my name because she doesn't know me that well,
Right.
But like she starts to associate names with the sound of your voice, and then that way she knows who you are without that. And I think C is a really good way of like seeing that as like, what if the whole culture was built around that, and then and now someone who is sighted is now the minority, and how interesting that is, because
it was so interesting.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And like I always said that being like having to lose my sight would be so difficult to navigate, because I think in my mind I'm like, my other senses are not great, like I would be lost, right? But then when you look at these societies and how people utilize the other senses, it's almost like sight was the most, I don't want to say inconvenient, but it definitely is the most distracting, I believe, or maybe not most, but it's such a highly distracting aspect. And I don't think we even realize it because
our culture focuses on it so much.
Our world is built on sight.
Our culture is built on it.
But
everything about it.
But even in C, you could see how well that the culture was able to do without sight.
Right.
Like to the point that like they can smell which person walked into the room.
Yes. Yeah. And for like almost how long ago, right? So it's like heightened senses on a level where it's
I think about that sometimes.
That is what happens to the brain.
Yeah.
I mean, like that, if that's not working in your brain, your other parts take it over, and you do have a better sense of smell and a better sense of hearing and those sort of things. And like, that's crazy to think. You can, this is like kind of off topic, but we can improve our sense of smell and vision.
Wow.
Like, is that not insane? We can improve our eyesight by like looking into the horizon, like doing eye exercise and like, and like smelling different things. Like that's so crazy.
That actually makes so much sense of why those other senses even seemed more heightened than we would even imagine they would be.
Yeah.
Because at that point, it's like, you're also sensing fear so much. It's like, then how do I survive if I can't see what's around? Like, we think we can't even protect yourself in the dark, right? It's like, these are individuals that are in the woods. They're crossing a bridge that's, I mean, like for one, like, bridge. I don't even know.
Helpless.
Yes, right? And they're finding these, and the way they communicate with the knots on the rope is on a whole nother communicative level, where it's like there's knots on a rope that tell a story, and the way that they so quickly go in and like read them, and then they know, it's wild. Yeah.
I think it's also interesting how like sense of smell is so intertwined with memory.
Totally.
Like
And taste.
And
smell.
Yeah.
And smell, like even for us, like there's so many studies about how smell is so more closely tied to memory than any other of our senses.
It's crazy.
And like there's so many things that we smell that we don't necessarily like even realize that we do.
Yeah.
And like it's so integral. And like there's studies that like women, for instance, who are on birth control, like if they met their like significant other while they were on birth control, and then like it changes the way that they smell their partner.
Yeah.
And all of the like the things that you smell to tell if that's a good mate for you.
Yeah.
And that sometimes women have found that when they get off birth control, they don't like the smell of the man that they're with. And they realize, oh, and then they're like, oh no. And then they're like, I don't like, like
catfish myself, like,
and how like in that, and I think that's so, because that's not something you think about, but like,
dogs can smell Parkinson's.
Yeah.
So you guys know,
right?
Yeah, they can.
And a human made this discovery.
There is a person who can smell it too.
She smelled it. She was the one who smelled it.
Like,
yeah, it was her
like
husband, and she was like, he's smelling different. He's acting different. Like something's wrong with him. And like so many years later, he gets diagnosed with Parkinson's, and she's like, she goes into the office with him, and she's like, everybody smells the same as my husband. And so then they did this experiment on her where they gave her like 20 shirts or something like that of people who had Parkinson's, had her smell them.
Wow.
Some had, some didn't, I think it was 30 shirts.
Yeah.
And she got them all right except for one person.
Yeah.
And then like 3 years later, that person got diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I also heard that story.
It's
so wild.
It's nuts.
Yeah, like we can smell
And so then they discovered
way more
dogs
than you
can-
think we can.
This lady and dogs, which probably we have the
I don't know.
capability, but we
I
just
need a movie about
can't.
this.
No, I know. Right now, I'm like,
written.
is that what Riley's trying to tell me? Like, it's just so. No, but even like dogs that can sense, like, if you're about to have a seizure, that to me was also so insane.
Or the smell of diabetes, like people talk about like diabetes, and like it's supposed to like when people have like an attack where they're undersugared, like it's supposed to smell like nail polish.
Wow. Okay.
And I was like, how interesting!
So
I heard that in a first aid class because I have to get certified all the time. And I was like, and this was just like one of the off stories that the lady was telling me, and I was like, that is fascinating. But also just like what smells associate with certain people. Like whenever I smell cigarettes, I think of my great grandmother because she smoked like a chimney. And it was just like, so every time I smell it, I think of her.
Yeah.
Or just like, but even like the smells of people, like I can smell my husband, I can smell my mom, like, and the smell of like when my mom wakes up in the morning, like, and how comforting that was for me as a child. And like, I'm just like, oh wow, like, and
the
like
smell of pine at Christmas.
like the smell of pine, like just there's so many smells around us that we like. I don't think we really think about it in our conscious mind.
It's stored in
unless you're like, but but like when you smell it too, like sometimes you just smell and you're like, oh, that reminds me of something,
right?
And you don't know why, and sometimes you're not like, it's not super conscious. I'm just in tune with it because I think about it a lot.
Yeah,
I'm very sensitive to smell.
But I wonder if it changes because like your taste buds change all the time, right? So does your
I wonder. I don't know.
Like if you liked vanilla.
Yeah.
Back in high school and you dislike vanilla, is there a way to smell vanilla without retching and thinking about high school? Like, or do you just totally lose that part of the spectrum smell wise?
Yeah.
I
don't know, but you might be able to associate it with other things, like if you incorporate it to other parts. But like music, like sometimes when you listen, I don't know if you, you listen to music, and then you're like,
somewhere in my memory, I don't know.
I went on a trip to Hawaii with my dad, and we listened to like this one CD. I was really into this band called Bare Hands. It was a very good band, and we listened to it the whole trip, and then like. I kind of like moved on to other things. And now every time I listen to that album, I think about that trip. Like the memories always come to me about that trip, and like different parts of my life and eras of my life. I think about.
Yeah, music is huge.
In my pursuit to my PhD that never happened, I took a class called
Life P.
My Life PhD. I took a class called Neuropsych of Music, and I was kind of like, I was a little disappointed at first because I was like,
that's cool.
I don't know, but then like it was pretty cool. I mean, I didn't like like the developmental part as much. Like when you're in the womb, what you're hearing. I mean, it is fascinating, but not that fascinating to me. But like, it was cool to hear like the way that like they talked about pitch and tones and all sorts of stuff, but like the beats and then like the breaks in the beats and what's like really tears at like your emotions in song.
Yeah.
And so I mentioned watching AGT, America's Got Talent, for the magic and the singing, because I really like listening to people sing. I'm like, sometimes I'm like, wow, that person's so good. And I'm like trying to figure out, like I'll play it again and be like, what is it about like the way they just like sang that note? Because there's like parts of songs where you're just like, this part is coming up, this part.
Or I'll even like start to like it then. Like, I think it's a good song, but like there's a moment that like, oh, this is gonna be one of those songs that you just connect with because that shift in tone, it hits that emotional nerve, or something. Where
there's a girl on YouTube that like goes through all the different music and she gets recommendations and stuff. I love System of a Down. I don't know if anyone else loves a band. Thank you. I love System of a Down. They're very musically interesting too. But that's kind of how I found her. My dad suggested it to her to me, but she goes through and like will explain like what they're doing musically. So she hasn't always heard the songs, and then she listens to it and she's like, oh wait, go back, because she's a music person. And then she's like goes through all of the music and like kind of breaks it down musically. And then you're like, and she's like, oh, he's using this kind of tone, or like he's using this like at this moment, like his voice, he's using this part of his voice that's like it's not really toned anymore. It's just like the feeling of it. Yeah. And that's giving this type of emotional response because like that's this. And like she really breaks that down, which is really fascinating. I wish I could think of her name, but
it makes me think of like when the same story is told by two different people and they have their different riffs on the same story, but it's everything right down to the intonation of the voice, everything right down to the pacing of the story, but it's the same story.
The subliminal book talks about this, about bringing it back to this. It talks about when people see a crime and they become an eyewitness, and then they do the lineup thing.
Right. Yeah.
Like the number of false positives, are insane. You know, and it just reminds me of like you see what you think you see. Yeah,
and like the trauma mind too, right? Like you're trying to remember something in a way that's like you don't even know if you're connecting with. That's one image. Yeah, like, it was a blur, and so you're trying to put facial features back, and you're like, I don't even know if I saw these facial features, but you're trying to piece it together.
And so you're like, that's it. That's it.
It's like it could be number two, right? Like, it's no.
And and when people go into like places that like the State Department or other things like that, where they have to like be in situations where they need to actually remember those things, they have like special training on how to try to like get people to engage that logical side of your brain while you're in fight or flight, and how difficult that is for some people. But also for some people it's easier, because sometimes like if you grew up in a household that was like not great, like sometimes they like you're like, oh yeah, that's more natural, like easier for people to kind of like move back into.
So time is a flat circle for some people, and we have come back to where we were at the beginning of the podcast, kind of. Before I end it, I'd like to go around and find out what stories you're looking forward to coming out or to consuming.
Well, right. Do you want to go first? I'm sorry.
Nope, you.
Just because I have an idea, because I'm currently reading the second book of A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I'm looking forward to reading the rest of that. Somehow the second book's even better than the first book, and it took all the things that I was like about from the first book and really like expands upon it, and then you're like, yeah, you know what? That is weird. And then I love that. So I'm really looking forward to reading more of that. And then also going and like seeing some of your like recommendations.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm like really interested in like seeing more about this. So
I gotta pull up my Audible to remember because my memory
yeah.
is 40.
I'm hoping that some of the other ones that we've been talking about.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to the second book of that because you said it was good, and I just read the first one, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking for the one you said, the Four Courts, right?
The Fourth Wing?
Fourth Wing.
Yeah,
Fourth Courts Wings. See, my memory.
Well, when we were in the courts, I get that.
I got that book at home, so I haven't read it, so I'm very excited about that.
You'll like that one.
I have Rabbits. Has anyone read the book Rabbits?
Rabbits, no.
Who's it by?
It sounded really good by Terry Miles.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should look it up. I mean, the reviews and like everything I read about it made me really want to read it. And then I got to finish The Emperor of All Maladies, a book about cancer. The rest are all science. They're not going to be that interesting to people, but I could give some good book recommendations.
Yeah.
Mine are like all, I think, based on more so, I think, either like Black feminist theory, I think. So not any specific, but there's actually one. I've been doing just a lot more research, I think.
Can you pull your mic closer?
Yeah, sorry. I think I was also leaning super far back. There's a book I don't think I bought it yet, but it's in the queue to be bought at some point. I knew I just needed to stop buying books that I knew I couldn't read yet, and so I was like, I might as well just wait to buy them. I know. It's actually a book called The Diary of a Slave Girl, and I've been doing so much. Yeah, it's honestly, I've been doing a lot of work on like the originalities of a lot of different even like movements or things. We even did like a timeline of like the women's movement or feminist movement or like anything having to do with
I have a book recommendation for you.
I'm all ears for any recommendations. And this really depicts the idea of what it was for Black women to be like their first advocates for themselves.
Yeah.
This was a Black girl who was a slave who was trying to advocate for herself to stop being sexually abused by her master, right? And to stop having to bear children. So my body is my body can't handle this anymore. I've had a lot of miscarriages. Like I'm really, she ended up taking this. I can't remember the exact year that it took place, but it was during a time period where it was more likely to be able to take something to court. And I say that very lightly because it was a time where obviously Black women had no place to be able to advocate for themselves in a court setting. Yeah. But she had done so anyway, just to kind of advocate for being free or being able to like not have to engage in these practices with this master. Obviously because her identity did not, get that passing, but just kind of like the idea of being your own advocate, even when you don't even have the space or the ability to do so. And so it's like just connecting with a lot of those stories, and it goes into her story of telling her stories, a diary of her stories. Yeah. There's many other stories like this that kind of just depict what it was to truly, put into words or paper some of those experiences that we just don't have that like direct, not language for, but we just don't have those direct depictions of. We have like, this historical depiction of things, people's perceptions of these kind of experiences, but having it from the people who experience it directly and who actually wrote these things and that they were able to come to fruition are really things I want to dive more into, just like the human stories of people who experienced things before I even knew how to explain, where I couldn't find words, right, to explain things. It's like, these are people who didn't even have space to think or feel some of these things, and they were still able to do so and push forward with it. And I think like that's where advocacy in my mind, like advocacy is derived from in my mind, right? Where we talk about these movements, but it's like so even before then, right? It's before we even had the space to call it a movement, right? There's individuals who are advocating for themselves in spaces. Absolutely. And then it needed that support later on just because you didn't have that, identity to be able to carry that out. So I know that's one book that I have that's in the queue. There's many, I probably should look, there's others, but I will let others share.
With that, like, there's a book called Storming Caesar's Palace. It is written by a white lady, but she compiles a lot of the stories of Black women. And it's a civil rights kind of story. So after slavery, a lot of people kind of went into sharecropping as a necessity. Yeah. And it's nonfiction of kind of the daughters of sharecroppers, and there was a migration into Las Vegas, and like the lives of people, and then realizing that they needed support, and so you have like the issues with child welfare and the issues with getting benefits, and like all of these things, like they weren't getting paid enough, and advocating for getting good enough pay, and so then you have like, oh, the casino owners are trying to cater to these rich white people from the South, so they can't give them all these jobs. But then later on, the mafia comes in, and it's the mafia. It's not super great, but they're also like a lot more amenable because they're actually less racist than other people. And so like you have like these cultural dynamics, and these women who are like, I need to make change and I need to advocate for my family, and there's not a lot of men for them to rely on,
right?
And it becomes these, how they kind of build this movement out of like necessity and the need for advocacy. It's really if you're interested in that kind of stuff, it is really, really good. And on a side note too, I've been reading a lot. Sorry, it's been a reading heavy semester for me. But My Grandmother's Hands is
I've heard of it.
It's just something like if you're interested in like kind of some of the stuff we've been talking about, a way of looking at racialized trauma in the U.S. and trying to heal some of that. And so it does a lot of body exercises, and it's both primarily for white and black bodies, and then other people can be a part of that as well. And it really speaks to like a lot of the topics that people talk when they talk about race in the U.S. and and a lot of the things that white people like to bring up, like and the traumas that they've experienced, and like there's a way that we can talk about that and not negate
the timing, like appropriate spaces for it.
Yeah, there's yes and but that doesn't also negate all of the other historical traumas that Black people have experienced.
It's a difference, right?
It's different, and we need to still acknowledge. Just because this doesn't mean we don't acknowledge this other piece. Yeah. But it's also like, how do we bring that back into the body and talk to our subconscious body with generational trauma and blah, blah. Yeah. It's like The Body Keeps the Score, and
such a good book.
And I also recommend Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman. Yeah. Those are very like intellectual based. Yeah. This one is very much like in the body and more body and like soul based, which is very interesting. It's kind of a different book. So.
And it's interesting when you talk about authors too, because I know like
and that's written by a Black man, I think.
But the second one, can you?
My Grandmother's Hands is written by a Black guy. I just don't know I can't remember everybody's name.
Yeah, because there was like, I think, controversy, because we had read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, but then there was another aspect of it where it was like, I think the story was taken from another Black female author, right? So it's like, that's another, like that aspect too of like integrity within work, right? Yeah. Or ethics within work, and it comes to appropriation of where content is coming from, right? And originality of content coming from, and how we derive it. And it's not to say stories can't be shared or built upon, right? It's about even like getting credit for where these stories are coming from and making sure that people are being seen and heard in that as well. I think that I was trying to look up the name of it, but it was like The Killers of the Flower Moon is another, that's a movie. I don't know why I haven't seen it yet. I think I've just been not going to the movies more, but that's one I really want to also look into too, when it just comes to how, land rights were obtained and through Native American rights. I think that was the basis of it, was like, Native Americans were put on a certain part of land that was more, dry, not fertile, but then all of a sudden struck oil. So it was like, well, then how do we should be profiting off of this too, right? We took all of your land, we put you to a place we thought that would not flourish, and maybe you might even die off, unfortunately. But then now that you have this gold mine here, right? Like, well, then we need to profit off that too, right? So it's like, then maybe we'll go in and we'll start marrying these women and then take land rights of this too, right? And I saw a man who was taking that story and brought it back to Africa, where he had experienced that in Africa too, where that's happening now, where a lot of land is being owned because of people coming in and forcing their way to like marry someone who's either occupying that land or just kind of like resident of that space. And kind of taking it now. They don't even live there. They'll go back to their country, and then they still have those land rights that they own forever and profiting off of it for umpteen years and things. So it's a lot of a lot of learning at this point.
And I think it's so important to like you said, get to hear from other voices. And for me, I actively like try to find books and stuff that talks about trauma and a lot of the things that we were talking about that are written by like Black individuals and especially Black women. And it is very difficult.
It's hard.
And it's difficult to find ones that other people have read and get recommendations. And so it's like, you kind of just like trying to throw in the dartboard. And like, I think the one that I use the most is actually The Deepest Well by Nadine Burke-Harris. Mm-hmm. And that's like more of a medical side, but was talking about it's talking about ACEs and things like that, which is very interesting. So, but like always trying to look for more recommendations for that as well.
So Maya Angelou, if you haven't gone in this direction, yes. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just read that for class, and highly recommend if it hasn't been on your shelf yet. Yeah. Another one that got read in class was The Handmaid's Tale. Mm-hmm. I had never read it until this semester, and now I want to go watch the show.
Yeah, it's wild.
Because I just don't know if I can.
You got to be in a place.
I just haven't been in the place
better now, only because like when it came out, it was during a lot of political. I mean, still heavily, but even more in a political place where it was like, this is too close to where we're at.
Well, so yes, but at the same time, it's kind of that vicarious trauma thing.
Sure.
Are you going to learn through it?
Yeah.
You're going to nug your way through, the ugly side of humanity in order to get better, kind of thing. Season 2 of Arcane is coming out in November. I'm tons excited about it.
That's exciting.
So excited. And Patrick Rothfuss came out with a new book.
He did?
The book that I want. It's not the book, but he came out with one.
So, what did he come out with?
He came out with one called, it's about one of the other characters, and I'm like, it's not the book I wanted, but I'll take it.
I've now reread it like twice, and now I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to reread it again.
Just to Road Between Desires.
I haven't read. I will say that if you guys haven't read Patrick Rothfuss's book, that is probably one of the best books I've ever read.
We've read.
Yeah,
like
it
is so well written. But you can tell like he doesn't, and I think this speaks to the fact that like the third book hasn't come out in so long. He is like a perfectionist, and he's like, this book will not come out until I am 1000% happy with it. And it's like, just give me the book. And he talks about that on his YouTube channel all the time, how upset he is that everybody keeps asking for the book. And I'm like, yes, but it's been forever, man.
Chris can tell you personally what he thinks.
Yeah.
I sat down with him for a couple of hours.
Oh, you did? Oh, cool.
Wow.
I had never read any of his books. I had never watched any of his stuff.
Okay.
So he was like, don't worry, you'll love it. When you get there, you'll love it, kind of thing. So, but he did talk about like the amount of pressure that is set on him when he's writing now for an audience that wasn't there before. And there's amounts of like, I mean, I think podcasters can probably relate to this. There's a lot of beating yourself up in the realm of creativity when you're creating something and you're in the person that shoots you in the face the hardest is yourself. Yeah.
Especially writing. I feel like writing has got to be such an emotional thing too. Like you're putting yourself into something. It's a lot of pressure, criticism. It's a lot.
He's got way more subscribers than I do, so I can only imagine.
Right? And everybody's just on there waiting for the third book announcement. I think it's just so intricate too, like his ability to be so intricate and to put so much thought into it. I remember I got to see him at the Library of Congress a couple years ago, and got to hear him talk, and I just remember thinking like he had thought so much about like the library that's in the book and how how they might process through things and how much he learned about all, and I was just like, wow, like you no wonder it takes you so long. Like but I think true. Like I'm very I think no matter what he puts out is gonna be amazing. Like he's not going to he's worked so hard on it, and
Yeah.
it's going to be amazing because it's him. So hopefully,
Thumbs up,
I like details.
yeah. So hopefully we'll see it soon. I finally convinced my husband to read them because he was like, no, because it's not finished yet. It's not all out. And I was like, I promise that it's worth it. It's worth being in the state where you're like agonizingly waiting for the next one.
Yeah.
And even if that, it's like, it's better to have loved than lost than to have never loved at all.
Yeah.
Is kind of how I feel about those books of like, I am so glad that I read them and I'm able to sit in the spot where I'm waiting for the third one. And maybe the third one will never come out and we'll all be sad.
Yeah.
And then someone like Robert Jordan, they're going to go through his notes and just publish it. Or maybe it never comes out, but like at the end of the day, like I'm still glad I read those books because I feel like it's like made me think about stories in my own life and changed kind of what I read and think about.
Yeah.
They're just, and the magic is so amazing.
So good.
So, ladies, let me invite you back for season 2 of the show.
Yeah.
And
I know we filled up the time.
I think we could probably just even the same topics. Yeah, same or the ones we didn't get to.
We did the ones we didn't get to.
If I can invite you back for maybe a Q&A before season 2, then maybe we'll be able to hit each other up and be like, so what questions do you have on the thing that we almost talked about, kind of thing. So
cool.
Yeah.
So
more book recs.
Last thing, thank you to GT for your wonderful mead. And Good Times Mead is not yet open for business, but when it is, it's going to be amazing.
It is very good.
Very good.
So smooth.
This episode is also sponsored by Loathsome Wind. Loathsome Wind, the band for which Dan from episode 7 is the lead singer and guitarist. Loathsome Wind can be found at www.loathsomewind.com, as well as in the show notes and on YouTube and Spotify. If you search for... It's all one word. I'm not going to spell it out. LOATHSOMEWIND.com. I am going to spell it out. They have comedy songs and music videos, and you should definitely check them out. There's a free sample at the end of this episode. And if you go to the show notes as well, you can find our link tree and come grab a table on Discord with some friends. Find us live streaming on Twitch. Listen to us on Spotify, Audible, Pocket Cast, and other podcast platforms, or watch the cleaned up version on YouTube. Cleaned up as in like the audio is going to be clean. We have behind the scenes pics on Instagram, and if you're not a Patreon member, you'll see news on when we're recording a new episode. Season 1 ends in mid-December. Subscribe everywhere. And jump on the Discord, so through Christmas and in the months ahead, we'll be able to trade some stories. So thank you for joining us, and come back with good stories. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Ooh.
Your boyfriend's a dickhole, a real fucking bridge troll. His mom should've used a better form of birth control. Your boyfriend's a shitbag, deserves to be bitch slapped. How can you ignore the mountain of red flags? Your boyfriend's a skid mark, the size of a car park. An addict, abusive, his future is so dark. Your boyfriend's a dingus, a waste of space doofus. He won't even go down to Conolingus. He left you on the floor when you were sick. He constantly begs you to suck on his prick. He won't even listen to you sing, even though you're a star. And he fucking pawned your guitar! I'm gonna need a minute. Your boyfriend's an asswipe, dumpster juice in July. A sleazy weasel creep who cheated in life. Your boyfriend's a butthead, a stain on your bedspread. A dried up, crumbly, tasteless piece of cornbread. Your boyfriend's a scoundrel, so please hear my counsel. He wants to control you, his love is a sick joke. Nobody likes him, he needs to be exiled. He deserves so much better than a loser man-child. He lost his mind when you put pepper on I'll admit, I might be a little bit biased. Because I want you all to myself.